Hello and welcome to 6 Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Deku with Fox Quirk was trained by Mirko. Part 1. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Humans were not made equally. Izuku Midoriya learned that lesson early in life. He couldn't help but think about the awful fate that had been dealt to him as he walked back towards his house, ruffled and alone in his black middle school uniform. He had received the terrible news that he would not possess a quirk, a superhuman talent that most kids acquire, when he was 4 years old. Some were fortunate, while others experienced misfortune. The person who made Izuku look so bad, for example, used to be his friend, before Izuku was labeled quirkless, of course. However, Katsuki Bakugo received a combined mutation from both of his parents, not just a quirk. Bakugo's development of the ability to cause explosions was just as significant as the extremely low combined mutation rates. Bakugo was aware that it was a peculiarity intended for greatness. So there he was, moping about himself. At Aldera Middle School, he had endured yet another humiliating day of being teased, denigrated, and generally mocked for his unattainable goal of becoming a pro hero. In all honesty, Midoriya was aware that he would need a peculiarity in order to become a pro hero. So he watched rather than practiced and prepared. He saw Bakugo train his quirk and get stronger. He marveled at the skills and accomplishments of the pro heroes he watched. He let his jealousy simmer as he observed others using their peculiarities. Midoriya was aware of his pitiful nature. He was a real coward at heart and a crybaby. And what kind of hero might he be? Nevertheless, he had to have faith in his ability to succeed and become a hero. He was forced to. He knew it would never happen, but it was maybe the only thing that kept him going. Ignoring the shadowy underpass he was crossing, Midoriya muttered, "It would have been easier if I had dreamed of being a cop." However, he simply had to aspire to be like All Might, the peace symbol and #1 hero. He ignored the manhole creaking open and the pair of evil eyes staring expectantly at him as he continued walking blindly. Something jumped behind him, but he was too preoccupied with his misery to notice. It was too late for Midoriya to realize that he was in trouble. His entire body was covered in an odd mucky substance. Terrified, Midoriya fought. Then the voice mocked him. It was attempting to strangle him and was a villain. No, not merely a villain. A slime or sludge person who desired to utilize his body. He snarled, "Just die already. The sludge villain. I need a suit before he shows up." But Midoriya persisted. His mouth was forced open, and he clawed desperately at the sludge. He made a fruitless attempt to get away from the monster. Even worse, the villain found it funny. Air soon began to fail Midoriya. Slowly, his movements slowed and consciousness drifted farther away. "Is this how I pass away?" Midoriya inquired in an oddly calm manner. "I'll die the same way I lived," choking against the impossibility, but as he gradually waned, an unfamiliar feeling, rage, rose from within him that he had never felt before. Then everything went dark, only to have Midoriya kneel down and cough out a repulsive mouthful of sludge after snapping his eyes open. Goddamn, it was terrible. He stayed there, retching and panting heavily. There, said a powerful, strong voice in concern. Midoriya was patted by a huge hand. Now, you are all right." Midoriya blinked incredulously. He turned sideways slowly. It was impossible to see him kneeling there. It isn't possible, not in this place. Nevertheless, his trademark smile, bright, glowing eyes, and large, muscular frame remain. He was the one. The giant of a man stood up and asked, "Are you feeling better now?" "Whoa, that's him." Midoriya gazed. Despite seeing it, he was unable to believe it. The #1 hero, All Might, who was dressed as a civilian, laughed proudly and said, "Have no fear, citizen, for I am here." His grin wavered, giving way to concern. He showed Midoriya 2 bottles and said, "For a moment there I feared I had been too late, young lady. That wretched villain nearly got you." As he spoke, Midoriya's mouth fell open. The green sludge was on the hero's hands. Inside, he saw a mouth and eyes struggling. Suddenly, Midoriya sat up straight and felt uneasy. He sensed something strange behind him, but right now, all he could think about was that his idol was directly in front of him. "All Might," was Midoriya's statement. He wasn't sure whether his excitement and shock or something else caused his voice to rise a few octaves. Anyway, talking jolted him out of his daze. "Oh my God, All Might. Can I have your—" He was picking up his school bag to retrieve his cherished notebook, which was battered and burned, when he noticed something was missing. Why did his fingers resemble long claws? He gazed at it. He didn't need any more emotions to add to the excitement that was already making his heart race. He felt it would explode with shock now, with dread. However, that was just the start. When Midoriya noticed that both of his hands had become claws, he exclaimed, "What the hell happened to me?" His ears were the next thing he felt. "Arg!" he exclaimed as his hands reached for the top of his head. "Young lady, what is the problem?" All Might asked anxiously. I have claws. And cat ears," Midoriya cried in horror. He hadn't decided yet, but this had to be the worst day of his life. He looked down at his chest, which was undoubtedly not manly, and all of a sudden he realized that things were far worse than he had initially believed. All Might's eyebrows shot up in confusion. "Cat ears. I had assumed by the tails you had a fox quirk." Tails. Midoriya jerked his head in one direction. Yes, there were large, fluffy tails, 3 of them, to be exact. They might as well be his, since the fur was the same shade of dark green as his hair. What? How? When? Midoriya then lost consciousness for the second time that day. All Might scowled after blinking at the young girl. All Might hummed, "I guess I should take her to a hospital." He stooped to lift her. But the girl exploded in a cloud of smoke as soon as he touched her. All Might retreated in surprise. "Oh, so it isn't just a mutation as I had first suspected." Was she still a fox girl when All Might chose the now modified fox boy? In his arms, he studied him or her. The boy had more tails now, but why? Was he taller, too? It was odd. However, who was he to pass judgment? "I do not know who you are, young man, or woman, but I can tell you have quite an interesting quirk," the mighty laughed. How accurate the number 1 hero was, if only anyone knew. UA is one of the most prestigious hero high schools in Japan, if not the best. The majority of the highest-ranked heroes, including the number 1 hero himself, were undoubtedly produced by it. Therefore, anyone who wished to reach the top would need to pass the institution's challenging and unforgiving hero course. The best facilities, training grounds, equipment, and support department were all at UA. That, along with its notoriety, might ensure a strong advantage in the cutthroat pro-hero industry. As a result, the difficulty of actually attending UA was not surprising. It was nearly impossible to secure a spot in the hero course on your own, and even then, it was known that you might not be able to hold it. Nearly half of the hero students were thought to have dropped out of UA by their last year, either due to expulsion or personal preference. However, it was contingent upon the class. At times, all students completed the 3 years of school, at other times, fewer than 3. To think that, of all people, Izuku Midoriya was on his way there, prepared to start his heroic career. People gave him different looks because he was a little too early in the subway station. In all honesty, he was aware that it was because of his present uniform. They might be witnessing the next top hero, who was he to say otherwise? What they all saw was a boy with dark green hair who looked plain and was on the verge of tears as he stared at the screens. He was unremarkable. He lacked horns, tails, and bright hair, with the possible exception of freckles. He groaned in his head, "Of course, I'll be late on the first day. The train I had to take was where?" With his heart pounding, his green eyes scanned the area. His sweaty hands tightened their grip on his yellow bag. Could it be that he was at the incorrect station? Indeed, Mustafa had only one, but what if there was no train and he had to take the bus instead? What if? He was distracted from his thoughts when he noticed a UA uniform among the bustling crowd. A dozen feet away from Midoriya, a short young woman strolled idly, absorbed in whatever it was she was listening to on those large headphones. There was a little pink school bag slung loosely over one shoulder. Midoriya reluctantly trailed behind her. She probably knew how to get to school and must have been a senior. Midoriya examined the long, furry white ears as he trailed behind the other UA student. Its long, smooth white hair contrasted sharply with her tanned complexion. He found that her feet were also long. In a matter of seconds, Midoriya recognized her peculiarity, rabbit. Only then did a name suddenly come to him. The precise notebook and page, Future Analysis for the Future, N12, page 29, could be seen in Midoriya's mind. Rabbit is a quirk. The previous year, she had placed 3rd in the sports festival, which is one of the most watched events in Japan, if not the entire world. Of course, aside from her name, he remembered a lot more about the rabbit girl. Fortunately, they arrived at a platform and waited there, so he didn't have to follow her around for very long. He made the decision to stay away from his one and only guide to Ua. Being called a creep was the last thing anyone wanted. However, he believed he could handle it because this was the platform for the train he had been looking for the entire time. His inquisitive green eyes roamed around, pleased to have made it. The sheer number of peculiarities was astounding. 10 feet away, for instance, were two men dressed in suits. At first glance, they seemed normal. Izuku did observe, though, that one had smoke trails emanating from his hands, which were nearly invisible. In his pockets, the other one seemed to have square metallic hands. Most people find it pathetic, but Izuku finds it fascinating. Izuku complained to himself, I would be happy to trade quirks with any of them. When the train arrived, Izuku was able to find a seat, at least until he offered it to an elderly woman at the next station. As more people arrived at the second station, he was unable to see the rabbit girl. Finally, he arrived at his destination and left with joy. Izuku was certain he would arrive in time after spotting UA in the distance. UA's grounds, with their enormous square towers and hilltop location, were difficult to overlook. Before he knew it, he had crossed the enormous steel gates that were open and entered a long, wide path that ran between tall trees. He was shocked to see the rabbit girl in front of him. Izuku realized he had a problem as soon as he arrived at the institution. He had no idea where his classroom was. He searched and looked everywhere, but every corridor led back to the beginning, regardless of which doorway he went through. He eventually began to panic once more. He hit something, or rather, someone, as he was about to make the umpteenth turn to his right. Izuku landed on his rear end. The other stood there and gave him a frustrated glare. The rabbit girl snarled, "Watch where you walk." Midoriya muttered, "Sorry," and bowed to her several times. "I am just lost." Her eyes were a vivid scarlet, Izuku saw. Did she have an albino rabbit quirk? Or a rabbit alone? On her tanned forehead, a white eyebrow rose high anyway. As they examined him from head to toe, Midoriya disliked those critical eyes. Despite the fact that she was not taller than him, Midoriya was intimidated. "What's your classroom?" she asked sternly. 1-1A, Midoriya stumbled. Her eyes widened and the other white eyebrow shot upward. Her face broke into a nearly taunting smile. She pondered, "Hold on, you're in the hero course." In defeat, Midoriya looked down and muttered, "Why yeah, I know I don't look the part, do I?" "Sorry, but I don't see making it far here, especially not in 1A, she said with a grin. "What's your quirk?" "She will laugh in my face if I tell her, won't she?" Her first words made him realize how sad he was thinking. Midoriya gave her a worried look. Wait, is 1A more intensive?" "You kidding?" She scoffed and then unexpectedly added, "Right, you don't know. You've got Aizawa as teacher, or Pro Hero Eraserhead as homeroom teacher. If you don't live up to his expectations or show no potential, he'll expel you." "He can do that?" inquired Midoriya. Although he was aware of rumors, he had always believed that they were intended to reduce the number of applicants for each entrance exam. "He sort of expelled everyone in my class last year, except me of course. Had to be transferred to 1B. Midoriya was appalled by the way she said this with a smile and a swollen chest full of pride. "So you better impress him, or this might be your last day here," she chuckled. "Your class is over there, by the way." She gestured behind him. Midoriya turned around, puzzled, and to his surprise, he saw a hanging plaque with the words, 1A, written on it not far from where he was standing. He gazed at it in disbelief. Had it always been hanging there? "Huh," was his only response. Thank you." "Whatever." The rabbit girl shrugged and walked past Izuku. She added idly, "Oi, good luck with Aizawa. You are going to need it." As he stepped outside the enormous classroom door, Midoriya grimaced. His heart was racing as he gazed at it. "Will my homeroom teacher be impressed or will I be dismissed?" He pondered. "I'm so over it, especially with my peculiarity." He forced himself to open the door despite his strong desire to get out of there. The sight of Katsuki Bakugo made him wince. Even worse, he was with a tall, dark blue-haired boy who looked very familiar. Why did those two have to be in the same class as Midoriya? "Get your feet off the table. Your behavior is really inappropriate for such a prestigious institution," the tall boy screamed, slicing the air like a mechanical karate. Midoriya sensed that his thoughts were returning to one of his notebooks. He had seen the blue-haired boy use his quirk during the entrance exam, and it made him think of someone else. Well, there was the boy's look and the quirk. He bore a striking resemblance to Tensai Iida, also known as Ingenium, whose details were found on pages 70 to 73 of Notebook Hero Analysis for the Future N10. Unlike Ingenium, this adolescent was experiencing exhaustion from his legs. With red eyes staring into Ingenium's impersonator, Katsuki yelled back, "Sawed off, 4 eyes." In all of his explosive rage. "Stop annoying me or I'll kill you." Kill me." A furious Iida doppelganger sprang. "What manner of attitude is that? Do you really want to be a hero?" Midoriya watched from where she stood. Perhaps expulsion wasn't all that horrible. Unfortunately, he wasn't overlooked. Bakugo's spiky-haired head was turned toward the doorframe as he glared at the blue-haired eye. The raging blonde gave him a scathing look that made Midoriya wince. "Ah, fox boy." Midoriya found himself staring into someone's chest, and he blinked ahead. He glanced up, then flinched once more. It was the lost clone of Ingenium. Was he going to lecture Midoriya? Since he had done so on a few occasions during the entrance exam. "I wanted to apologize for my aberrant behavior during the exam." Midoriya blinked once more, this time in amazement. Someone was expressing regret to him. Moreover, this boy was bowing in reality. That was novel, and strange. Undoubtedly strange. There is no need. Hesitated Midoriya. With his bespectacled hands robotically karate chopping the air, the boy insisted, "On the contrary. It was hypocritical of me. I am Iida Tenya, at your service." Midoriya looked down at the offer hand and answered, Midoriya Izuku." He took it tentatively. Iida's more than enthusiastic shaking squeezed his hand, nearly tearing it apart, and he instantly regretted it. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I hope we both accomplish our noble mission and become brave heroes." Iida shouted blindly, shaking Midoriya's arm like a deranged android. Fortunately, Iida let go of the boy with the green hair. Something clicked in Midoriya's mind as he stroked his now throbbing hand. Midoriya exclaimed in amazement, Wait, Iida. Does that mean nothing good, of course, can last forever?" "Deku," exclaimed Bakugo. "What the fuck are you doing here?" Bakugo's glaring eyes made Midoriya try not to wriggle. "Will you stop yelling so violently?" Iida yelled. "And watch your language, it is." Bakugo yelled, "Screw you, 4 eyes." As everyone's focus returned to Midoriya. "You shouldn't be here, you quirkless little shit." "Quirkless?" Iida asked, looking at the two in confusion. "I believe you are wrong, ruffian. Midoriya here has Fox Boy." The name made Midoriya shudder, and she hoped it would never be used. But when he recognized that chirpy tone, his body tensed. He turned around, sweating, only to see a brunette with a round face. Midoriya, who was short and had red cheeks, felt his face heat up beneath the adorable girl's sparkling brown eyes. "You made it," she grinned and exclaimed. Once more, Midoriya thought the whole thing was pleasant, if odd. It was a pleasant change of pace to be spoken to by a cute girl, especially one wearing such a uniform. Ignoring Midoriya's stiff embarrassment, she continued, "I was worried you hadn't gotten enough points." "Thank goodness for rescue points, huh? I don't think I would have made it otherwise." Behind Midoriya, she saw Iida. "Oh, you made it too, robot boy." Midoriya couldn't resist chuckling. In response to the name, Iida puffed and huffed indignantly and began karate chopping the air while delivering a protracted lecture on the importance of showing kindness and respect to strangers. Fortunately, he was cut off before he could complete his opening remarks. "If you are here to make friends, then leave." Everybody turned to face the door. A rather disheveled man with untidy hair was standing nearby Midoriya and company. Midoriya instantly recognized the man. Hero Analysis for the Future N9, page 123 to 127, Shoto Aizawa, also known as the Erasing Hero, Eraserhead, with long black hair, stubble, and dark bags under his eyes. Dead giveaways included the strange steel-colored scarf, the knife strapped to a shoulder, and the hanging goggles. The others, including Midoriya, rushed to their seats, or as close to them as they could find. The boy with the green hair was shocked to learn that every seat was taken. Midoriya observed that the students' facial expressions varied from obvious bewilderment to laughter. Some of the people appeared nervous. When had they come? Aizawa, meanwhile, walked calmly to the front desk and gave the class a sullen scowl. He stated in a mysterious manner, "I am Aizawa Shota, your homeroom teacher, for the time being." Midoriya frowned when she said, "Technically, I should be taking you to orientation." In technical terms, what did he mean? But since that is a waste of time, we shall skip it. Instead, we will be having a test. Midoriya suddenly heard his classmates muttering in fear. A few people were an exception, such as Iida, who was sharpening his pencil and ready for whatever test Aizawa had planned for them. Yes, a test, Aizawa said, her lip curving into a savage grin. A test to determine if you have the potential to become heroes. Midoriya gazed fearfully at the instructor. It wasn't just him. Aizawa Shota didn't think of himself as cruel or wicked, but he had to admit that he was sometimes a little tactless. It was one of those things that his friends and boss would always remind him of. Even though it made sense to heed their counsel, Aizawa struggled to sympathize. For now, however, he had no sympathy at all. He stared at his prospective students and sighed in his mind, these are snot-nosed brats. Snotty brats who crave notoriety and renown. The training fields were where they had assembled. Acting like typical teenagers, the students joked and talked while wearing their Navy gym uniforms. Such a thing was not acceptable to Aizawa, but he was drawn to one student in particular, Izuku Midoriya. Standing a few feet away from the others, he appeared dejected rather than anxious. Enough, hissed Aizawa, at least the brats understood when to obey. It took you 15 minutes to make it here. I expect you to change in 5 minutes or less in the future, if you remain in the hero course. Wait, you can't expel us. We just started, exclaimed a horrified girl with pink skin. I can and I will, was Aizawa's final statement. This isn't any school, this is UA and you are here to be heroes. Someone said, but that isn't fair. Fair, life isn't fair. Natural disasters, catastrophes, accidents, life has the nasty habit of throwing all sorts of challenges. The weak shall whine about injustice or unfairness. Heroes accept what can't be changed and overcome the trials of life to assist those unable to. If you think you won't make the cut in my class, then leave. Aizawa couldn't help but show her satisfaction as no one else spoke. Good. Now, Aizawa inhaled deeply. He was beginning to despise his life because it kept happening every year. Yes, he had already done so. He sighed and added, let us get this quirk apprehension test over with. Quirk, apprehension. Aizawa gave the order. Bakugo, step forward. The volatile blonde with spiky hair followed instructions. His scowl expressed his frustration, but his eyes were burning with fear. Aizawa was aware of that expression. No matter how much he wanted to subvert Bakugo's conceit and arrogance, he was forced to follow Principal Nezu's guidelines. How long could you throw a softball in middle school? Asked Aizawa. 70 meters, the blonde sneered. Aizawa commanded, try it, with your quirk. He tossed Bakugo an odd ball. After catching it, the boy just stared at it, puzzled. The boy most likely realized that was no ordinary ball. Aizawa pointed to the painted circle on the floor and said, you can do whatever you want, as long as you don't leave the circle. Aizawa grinned and said, oh, and one more thing, don't hold back. Bakugo's frown gradually turned into a savage smile. He looked at Aizawa as though he was still in shock at the question. Bakugo eventually threw the ball after turning to face the open field. Die. Boom. The huge explosion that rocked the field was disregarded by Aizawa. His attention was on the other pupils. They all stood back, terrified by the teen who was making explosions, as was to be expected. However, Midoriya and a girl named Kyokujiro who had jacks in place of earlobes winced in agony. Suspicious, Aizawa narrowed her eyes at Midoriya. Aizawa checked his phone after he had recovered from the shock of what Bakugo had done. Bewildered, the students waited for him to speak. Aizawa smirked and held up his cell phone as there was a ping. According to Aizawa, 702.1 meters, today, we will go through the same exercises you went through in middle school. This time, you will use your quirks and discover your upper limits. He could see the joy on everyone's faces. Oh, poor idiots. That sounds like fun, exclaimed Mina Ashido, the student with the pink hair. Fun. Aizawa glared at the girl and grunted. You aren't here for fun. You are here to prove you are worthy to stay in the hero course. The students' faces went white with fear. That's right. If you don't give your all today, I will expel you. He isn't joking, muttered Midoriya. Everybody turned to face him, and Aizawa arched an eyebrow. He grimaced at their teacher and said, he expelled the entire class last year. Didn't you? On the first day, Aizawa smiled, happy that someone was aware of the danger. The pupils were terrified and completely incredulous. Some seemed to smile confidently, some gulped, and some glared at their feet. They didn't start whispering, at least. Perhaps there was still hope. Aizawa smirked at them and challenged the brats to go above and beyond his expectations, saying, "Give your all, today, or better yet." Yes, those increasing expressions of resolve pleased him. Fearful or nervous, but resolute. It was what distinguished the heroes from the common people, the sheep from the wolves, the losers from the winners. Who could have known? That year, Aizawa might have the opportunity to teach. Aizawa gave the order, "Okay," as a warm-up, trot around the running track. The pupils were apprehensive. Naturally, the others would follow if the overly robotic Iida simply began to run. Unwilling to take second place, Bakugo pursued the bespectacled classmate, and the two recommended students, the cold-blooded Todoroki Shoto and the wealthy girl Yaoyorozu Momo, did the same. The others began to trot after that. Aizawa gave them a few minutes after the warm-up was over, primarily to observe their behavior. Iida, who always seemed to be enthusiastic, began to stretch. The same three did as before, but they kept a clear distance from one another. Perhaps realizing the benefits of stretching or just out of habit, the other students imitated the robotic boy. The teacher saw that groups began to form as they went along. Strangely enough, Iida appeared to have attracted people to him in a different way than the others. First, Midoriya Izuku and Uraraka Ochako were drawn to Iida for various reasons. Aoyama Yuga joined them, which did not surprise Aizawa because they had been at the same battle center. To Aizawa's surprise, Fumikage Tokiyami and Shoji Mezzo were stretching alongside the group. Aizawa could tell that most had planned to approach Midoriya, but Iida seemed to begin lecturing about the value of stretching. They most likely wanted to know more about their homeroom teacher based on the whispered remarks. Nobody dared to speak during the first test, which was a 50-meter run. As the student concentrated on the task at hand, there was a sense of both fear and resolve in the air. Students stood grimly and firmly beside the running track. This batch was beginning to appeal to Aizawa, though he would never acknowledge it. The Quirk apprehension test got underway when the teacher called the first two runners, Iida and the frog girl Suyu Asui. A robotic camera on the finish line would record the time from start to finish after each pair that was called would take their positions and run as quickly as they could. Aizawa examined each pair, evaluating each student's level of effort. He had so far found his prospective students' general proficiency to be acceptable. But they still had time to make a mistake. The initial fear and panic subsided, and some excitement took its place. They didn't get to use their eccentricities in a mock competition very often, and the class was in danger of becoming too lighthearted. Naturally, things couldn't possibly go as planned. At some point, something had to go wrong. When Aizawa called, "Midoriya, Bakugo," Iida nodded and said, "Do your best, Midoriya." Uraraka exclaimed, "You can do it," with excitement. Midoriya, however, had a fearful and determined face. As they marched to the starting line, Bakugo, for his part, squinted angrily at the boy with the green hair. They positioned themselves, leaned forward, and then, poof. The run was supposed to be started by Aizawa. But when Midoriya exploded into a thin cloud of white smoke, he was taken aback. He was aware of Midoriya's peculiarity because he had seen it happen during the entrance exam, or at least he believed he did. Ultimately, Aizawa was unaware that Midoriya was capable of doing that. "What the fuck?" exclaimed Bakugo. "Since when can you turn into a fox?" He was a fox, too. Almost as large as a wolf, and a green one at that. Aizawa looked at the students and saw that Uraraka and Iida, who were likely more familiar with Midoriya's peculiarity than she was, were equally confused. Fox Midoriya just prepared himself and cocked his head. According to Aizawa, "Ready," Bakugo quickly set aside Midoriya and got ready. But he did give the fox beside him one last bewildered glare. "Set, go." And they left. Bakugo used his explosions to propel himself at crazy speeds, while Fox Midoriya ran at full speed. It should come as no surprise that Bakugo arrived first. But the fox had been swift, quicker than any human could run. After finishing, Midoriya returned to his human form with another poof. Aizawa recalled that he had not filled out that form for the entrance exam. Aizawa was actually unaware that Midoriya could take multiple extra forms. Bakugo bellowed, "Oi, Deku, since when do you have a quirk?" With trepidation, Midoriya turned to face the explosive teenager. He answered meekly, "It is a recent thing, Kachan, and..." Bakugo yelled, "Don't give me that crap," and grabbed Midoriya by his uniform. "You are quirkless. You don't just get a quirk." Aizawa let out a sigh. He detested such drama, but even so, Aizawa was deeply offended by Bakugo's demeanor. Was Bakugo unaware of Midoriya's peculiarity? How? Aizawa had discovered that they had attended the same schools since kindergarten. There was a problem here. Naturally, he had to put an end to the resulting conflict before it got out of hand. Bakugo shouted, "Were you hiding it from me?" Uraraka yelled angrily, "Oi, what's your problem?" And Iida followed suit. "This is completely unacceptable," Iida reprimanded arrogantly. "Enough," hissed Aizawa. His long, hanging hair stood up, and his eyes glowed red. The teacher focused his quirk on Bakugo while the class stared at him in awe and terror. Because of their close proximity, Aizawa was aware that it would have an impact on Midoriya. He therefore didn't anticipate Midoriya going poof once more. But Midoriya's form was far more familiar than a fox's. When Bakugo saw the boy he was holding, his mouth dropped open in shock. Aizawa concealed his astonishment with a quirk. Conversely, Midoriya appeared astonished. Bakugo's surprise didn't last long. "What the fuck, Deku? How?" With his canine teeth bared, Midoriya snarled, "Don't touch me." At Bakugo. Behind the now feral-looking boy, 9 long green tails flailed angrily. His emerald eyes stared savagely into Bakugo's eyes, and his fox ears were flat on his head. The razor-sharp claws on Midoriya's hand were visible to Aizawa. "If you don't cease this childhood drama, consider yourselves expelled," warned Aizawa. Bakugo took a step back, frowning, and Midoriya gave a hiss. Aizawa scowled as he turned off his quirk because his eyes were becoming irritably dry. In some way, Midoriya's personality had completely changed. In contrast to his meek and pitiful demeanor, this form appeared poised to bite Bakugo in the throat. Aizawa recognized that as Midoriya's actual form. He doesn't have an emitter-type quirk. With a core mutant quirk, it is essentially an enhancement type. He squinted at the boy with the green hair with suspicion. So why was the quirk file incorrect? TCH, whatever, Bakugo muttered as he left the tracks. After that, Midoriya appeared to relax, but he continued to squint until Bakugo had gone a sufficient distance. When he did, he saw the other students' shocked expressions, and Aizawa saw how shame, guilt, and, was it fear? Fill the fox boy's face with water. With a grimace, Midoriya turned away and changed into a human. Iida put a hand on Midoriya's shoulder and said, "Are you all right, Midoriya?" After flinching and staring at the hand in terror, the boy reluctantly nodded. With a scowl at Bakugo, Uraraka complained, "That jerk. Seriously, what's wrong with him?" "Enough of this," Aizawa moaned. "Let's just get this test over with." So they did. Aizawa returned her focus to each student as they completed their tests. He did notice that he was focusing on the spectators, observing the dynamics of the class. Students were avoiding Bakugo after their brief altercation. Bakugo, on the other hand, appeared indifferent. Indeed, it appeared that Bakugo was still in love with Midoriya. Why does it seem to me that Bakugo harassed Midoriya for the majority of the Fox Boy's existence? Aizawa pondered. He glanced at Midoriya, who appeared somewhat shaken and ashamed, even though she was returning to her former submissive self. There was a problem with the boy, something about his peculiarity, or perhaps his self-worth. Ultimately, tests proceeded smoothly, and Bakugo seems to have learned his lesson. Aizawa discovered that Midoriya could transform into a fox or his 9-tailed fox-human hybrid form. The latter was stronger, and the former was quicker. Both that and his 9 tails functioned as harmful appendages. Aizawa had witnessed Midoriya use them to destroy robots, stretching out no more than 3 meters and hardening into piercing drills. Though they were far weaker than Masharao Ojiro's one tail, really, that one tail allowed the kid to almost fly. They served as extra arms to strengthen his grasping, a move Midoriya adapted from Mezo Shoji's multi-armed quirk, or springs to increase his jumps, a move Midoriya adapted from Ojiro. Nevertheless, Midoriya consistently returned to her weak human appearance. It appeared that Midoriya avoided changing forms like the plague, but Aizawa disliked making hasty assumptions. Aizawa pondered whether Midoriya wasn't afraid of his wilder side given the 9-tailed form's savage display. But Aizawa had no intention of prodding. Following the conclusion of the final exam, students stood waiting for the final decision with sweat on their faces, pale faces, and trembling hands. Aizawa looked at each of them for a moment. He couldn't deny that he liked their terrified expression. Aizawa said, "It's time to decide who will be expelled." A chorus of squeaks and gulps sounded. He grinned. "All of you." Looks of horror, rage, and despair were all present, and boy, did Aizawa love it all. "Were acceptable, quiet." After turning around, Aizawa began to leave. Astonished, 20 sets of eyes gazed at his leaving back. Without looking back, Aizawa added dismissively, "See you tomorrow then." They would have seen their teacher's grin of satisfaction if they had looked at his face. This batch was good, I hope they don't make a mistake. After stumbling back to the classroom, Class 1A took their seats. Some knelt down and stayed on the floor, still trembling, while others sat on the tables and chairs. Even the icy Todoroki appeared content to stay seated. Of course, there was one exception. "Oi! Stop your whining, you extras! Oi! You bubble head, move out of my way!" Bakugo yelled. Mineta Minoru shouted back, "Hey, what's your problem, man?" Bakugo screamed, "I said, move it," as he let his palms explode. Mineta gave a little squeak and ran off. After giving the small boy one final growl, Bakugo picked up his bag and walked away. Iida said, "Wait, you are already leaving." Bakugo sneered, "What do you want me to do, Four Eyes?" "Stay to sing Kumbaya." He started to walk away, but stopped and looked at Midoriya. He left after saying, "And you, Deku, I am not done with you." The students let out a sigh of relief as soon as he disappeared behind the door. Mina Ishido sighed, "What a piece of work." Midoriya grimaced as she turned to face him and asked, "What's his problem?" Uraraka hummed, "Yeah, he seems to really hate your guts." Midoriya pondered, her smile asymmetrical, "That's Kachan being Kachan." "Hold on, are you friends or something?" inquired Kirishima Ejiro, perplexed. "Because you looked ready to kill him when you were all fox-like." He wasn't the only one who found the two boys confusing. However, Midoriya simply shrugged because he was hesitant to say anything. With a renewed sense of responsibility, Iida yelled, "All right, everyone. I assume that classes are over. However, there might be material our teacher forgot to hand over." Halfway through packing their school bags to go, Todoroki and the others froze. The statement, "I was wondering about that," was made by Yaoyorozu. "I was under the impression that there was working material to be given at the start of the day, a guide regarding the school's facilities and proper access to them." She looked over at Iida. "Perhaps we should find the teacher's office and inquire further." With two hands raised in excitement, Iida declared, "That seems like a proper course of action. I volunteer to go." Midoriya spluttered, "I'll go with you. Maybe we'll have to bring something back, right?" Iida nodded and said, "Ah yes, you are correct. Then let us depart." Suyu bluntly remarked, "You are a bit of a weirdo, aren't you?" Ribbit. While the rest of the class laughed, Iida choked, agitated. "He's just a bit enthusiastic," said Midoriya, smiling amiably. "Can't blame him, can you? We are in Ua, after all." Kirishima hummed in agreement, "He has a manly point." "What is the matter with you and manliness?" asked the huge, muscular Rikido Sato. Iida and Midoriya left, the former having recovered from the earlier humiliation, while Eijiro Kirishima attempted to educate his classmates about the complexities of manliness. Once outside, they had to deal with a crucial problem, locating the teacher's office. They tentatively agreed to march on, at least until they encountered a teacher or student to question. Regretfully, there was nobody in the hallways and it seemed like classes were still in session. Midoriya was unconcerned, even though he was with Iida, who, oh dear, Iida was giving a lecture and he hadn't noticed. He needed to take a walk to get his mind straight. "Oi, it's you." Midoriya stopped and looked back. He was surprised when a very family-oriented girl gave him a funny smile. The rabbit girl inquired, "So, did you survive Aizawa or what?" "Yeah," Midoriya said sheepishly, "we kind of did. But he kind of left us to our own devices." To the surprise of the rabbit girl, she exclaimed, "Hold on, you weren't expelled." She spent time with Midoriya. "Really? You must have somehow impressed him. What did say your quirk was again?" "Excuse us, fellow student, but we were presently searching for the teacher's lounge," Iida intervened. Like Midoriya, the rabbit girl turned to face Iida and immediately examined the boy from head to toe. The rabbit girl said, "Go down those stairs, turn right, and you should find it straight ahead." She turned around and moaned, "I guess I should go now, uck." "We appreciate your kind guidance, fellow student," Iida said, bowing to the rabbit girl who was leaving. "Whatever," the girl huffed dismissively. The two boys arrived at the teacher's lounge after receiving instructions. The actual space was made up of several desks, each with a computer and owned by a different teacher. Particularly, there were tall notebook stacks on one desk. But there was no teacher at the moment. Rather, they encountered the principal. The voice called out, chirping and squeaky, "Why hello there, young ones." When Midoriya and Iida looked down, they noticed something that was barely waist deep and dressed in a nice suit. The white little rat bear dog thing gleefully exclaimed, "I know what you were thinking. Is he a rat? Is he a bear? Is he a dog? Yes, he is the principal. I am Principal Nezu at your service." Iida bowed to the creature and said, "It is a pleasure to meet you, sir." Midoriya quickly adopted Iida's strategy. "I assume you're from Class 1A, Nezu hummed, caressing his chin. "I presume you came in search for the curriculum, schedules and any material you should have been given today." "Why yes, sir," was Midoriya's halting response. Nezu grinned and said, "I expected as much." He gestured to the desk with the stacks of notebooks and said, "That's what you're looking for. Please, give it to your classmates if you can." Had he been awaiting them, Midoriya scowled at the idea. No, it's not possible. But he found it incomprehensible that the principal would simply be loitering in the teacher's office while everyone else was in class. Iida eyed the piles and remarked, "That's quite a lot. We will require 2 trips or additional assistance." With a dejected sigh, Midoriya said, "That won't be necessary." The human Midoriya was replaced by a 9-tailed one, and there was a slight poof. His tails reached the desk and curled delicately around the notebooks to pick them up, resembling the powerful kraken's tentacles. Iida was impressed as he saw Midoriya balance 4 piles on his tails, then give Iida one and use his claws to take another. Nezu hummed, "Quite the versatile Quirk." That knowing glint in those black beady eyes did not sit well with Midoriya. "Say, Midoriya, if you do require any assistance in achieving your quirk's full potential, you should seek guidance from the teachers." A smirk spread over the rat dog beat. "Recovery girl and hound dog can help you, as can Midnight." Midoriya's face brightened like a dying sun, much to Iida's bewilderment. He gulped as his ears pressed flat against his green curls. Perplexed, Iida gazed at the fox boy. If the principal had given him this honor, he would have been overjoyed. Flustered, he spluttered, "That W won't be necessary." "If you say so," Nezu said, his beady, intelligent eyes glimmering brightly. "Iida, let's go," Midoriya muttered. Principal Nezu gave them a wave that Iida interpreted as friendly. But Iida couldn't help but see the grimace on Midoriya's face. He was somewhat taken aback by the previous conversation as well. Iida continued studying Midoriya after they were outside. Beyond the obvious, the green-haired boy seemed different. The now feral version had somehow lost his meekness and was carrying himself with newfound strength. He seemed preoccupied, too. The two of them walked through the UA hallways with a stack of notebooks in their arms and in Midoriya's tails. Iida said courteously, "Midoriya, may I interrupt your thoughts with an inquiry?" With a toothy smile, Midoriya graciously responded, "Iida, there's no need to be so polite." His sharp teeth were not missed by Iida. "But yes, ask away," he added coolly. "Why did the principal offer Professor Midnight's assistance? I do understand the school guidance counselor and, maybe, the school nurse, but why the modern hero art history teacher?" Bewildered, Izuku questioned, "Midnight is the what now?" He complained, it is nothing, really. Why you see I developed my quirk a bit later than most you so I still need to control." Iida arched an eyebrow in curiosity and worry. "May I ask how much later?" Midoriya laughed cautiously and said, "Let's say I didn't have a quirk throughout grade school." Iida halted his pace, incredulous at Midoriya. It made Iida gasp, "You jest." Iida realized he had touched a delicate subject when he saw Midoriya's dejected expression. "You developed your quirk late and still made it into UA. I apologize for my rudeness. It simply is, I was under the impression quirks always developed early during our childhoods at the age of 4. "Not in all cases," Midoriya remarked glumly as she continued to march. Iida rushed to catch up with him. Midoriya sighed, her ears displaying a great deal of grief and embarrassment. Sometimes they have extreme activation conditions. Other times, the user may unconsciously keep his quirk inactive. Iida knew he needed to shift the topic. However, how could he respond? He was too damn curious, but he didn't want to come across as impolite or demanding. How much later did Midoriya's quirk appear? A few years. Did that imply that he had been quirkless at first? Iida was always asking questions. Unfortunately, they had returned to the classroom before he could come up with a question. When Uraraka called, "Hey guys." The notebooks were put on the teacher's desk by Iida and Midoriya. They split 38 of them up there, 2 for each student. As he handed each pair of notebooks a schedule, a list of school rules, a guide to school facilities, and more rules, people continued to look at Midoriya with curiosity. With a genuine smile, Ojiro remarked, "Ha, neat. Those tails of yours sure are something." Midoriya countered, "They aren't as strong yours, though." Hantashiro scratched at his head and said, "Just what is the deal with your quirk, man? You can turn into a fox and into a fox boy, but your fox boy form also has super tails and claws. It seems a little overwhelming to me," Kyokujiro remarked. Yuga Aoyama glistened as he posed and declared, "Yes, Mon Ami. Our furry friend here is most powerful. He was able to take down a zero-pointer by the power of his furriness alone." "You did what now?" exclaimed Minoru Mineta. With hesitation and confusion, Momo Yaoyorozu questioned, "What is a zero-pointer?" The invisible girl Toru Hagakure cried out, "They are these big-ass robots from the entrance exam. Like skyscraper huge." "No way," exclaimed Kaminari, incredulously. Then Kirishima said, "That is so manly." With stars in her eyes, Uraraka recounted, "Yeah, he was so cool. I was like, oh no, I'm stuck here," and he was like, grr. Then the robot was all, beep boop, and then he jumped and it was all pew pow kaboom. The way everyone was staring at her made her flush as she looked around. "That was quite the odd storytelling," said Fumikage Tokiyami, the bird-headed boy. Totally embarrassed, Midoriya poofed back into his human form. Midoriya quickly begged, it wasn't that impressive. The robot W wasn't that big and N. Rikido Sato laughed, "Geez, learn to take a compliment," and Koji Koda nodded next to him. Before they began filing out themselves, the class gave a hearty laugh, minus Todoroki, who had slipped away when no one was looking. They appeared to have made it through their first day at UA, and they are currently unconcerned about any issues that may arise. Glancing down at his notebook, Midoriya read his most recent entry again. Midoriya closed hero analysis for the future N15 and handed his seat to the closest person as the subway came to a stop and people began to pour in. Though he wasn't sure if it was wise, he had been considering writing more about his classmates. He might need more room to write, so he might have to wait to witness their quirks in action, but it was really difficult to keep his quirk analysis in check. "Whatcha thinking about, arg, poof?" As the green-haired teenager captured his heart, all the heads in the train turned to face the human boy who had transformed into a fox boy. Midoriya discovered that the rabbit girl, who was now laughing her ass off, was the one who had startled him. Fortunately, he was soon forgotten. He gave the girl with the white hair a homicidal glare. Sorry," she laughed, causing tears of happiness to fall down his cheek. I just didn't expect you to transform or something." She inhaled deeply and returned to her relaxed, easygoing manner. "So that's your quirk, huh?" she asked. Midoriya snarled, "It's called none of your business." Startled, he blinked, then added quickly, Sorry, I didn't mean to sound that angry." Unfazed, the girl cocked her head in bewilderment. She asked curiously, so you are some kind of emitter type? Or are you a mutant type?" With a sigh of shame, Midoriya said, "I rather not talk about it," before he reverted to his human form. "I guess you are a mutant type." "Yes," the girl replied with pride, "my quirk is called Rabbit." Self-explanatory, right? What's the matter with your quirk? If it managed to impress the likes of Aizawa, then it got to be something else, right? "It is just, well," muttered Midoriya. "It is complicated, all right." The girl pondered, "Oh ho, now I am more curious, but to each their own, right?" As the train came to a stop once more and more people began to arrive, the two stood side by side without saying anything. The two UA students were pushed fairly close together by the crowd, and she smirked at him as he blushed and looked away. "What's the matter, fox boy? You don't bite, do you?" She was joking. She gave Midoriya a guffaw when she grimaced. Fortunately, they didn't speak again. After arriving at their station, they walked side by side in the direction of the school, seemingly in agreement. However, they remained silent, possibly reassured by each other's presence but unwilling to converse about anything unimportant. Once they arrived at the school, they left for their individual classrooms without even saying goodbye or even looking at each other. Midoriya soon learned that even though he was attending a hero school, it was still a high school. Class 1A had math and English after a heated roll call with Aizawa. It was strange, even if pro heroes taught it. Midoriya wanted to be a respectful student and a fanboy at the same time. Anyway, he managed to get to lunch without looking foolish. It was quite the experience at lunchtime. The cook at the school was also a pro hero. The sharp contrast between his middle school and high school experiences was one thing that astounded Midoriya. He had managed to establish a close-knit friendship with several of his classmates, including Iida, Uraraka, and Aoyama. Although they were a noticeably quiet participant in the conversation, Mezzo Shoji, Koji Koda, Fumikage Tokiyami, and Rikido Sato were also seated at the same table. Alongside the others, Mina Ishido and Eijiro Kirishima were the life of the lunchroom. The only exceptions were Bakugo and Todoroki, who sat alone and as far away from everyone as they could. The evening then arrived, along with the one class that everyone was anticipating, heroics. Although they had all speculated about that class, it was certain to differ from the nearly routine classes they had taken up to that point. Who could have known? Perhaps they were allowed to dress up in their own costumes. Uraraka questioned from her seat, "Do you think we'll spar or something?" "I don't know," the seated Midoriya pondered. He surveyed the area. He was shocked to see that everyone was waiting for heroics class to start. Perhaps they were all affected by the same trauma caused by Aizawa. It is a bit early for anything practical, right? Maybe it will be just theory. If the pens and folder that were already open were any indication, Iida obviously thought so. Midoriya wasn't entirely certain. As a matter of fact, nobody understood what pro hero was teaching them. Nonetheless, the classmates had a very similar guess. "I am coming through the door." "No way," the pupils exclaimed, turning their heads in surprise. All Might, wearing his Silver Age costume, said, like a normal person. As he entered in the most bizarre manner imaginable. All Might, however, was anything but typical. Someone squealed, "Holy crap," and it wasn't Midoriya. All Might's signature smile said, "Greetings, young ones, are you ready for some heroics?" A thunderous, "Yeah," was emitted by everyone, including Koda and Shoji. "Then let us waste no time. Today, you shall learn the basics of heroism, and that, young ones, is best learnt through practice. So let us go to ground B," said the mighty. He held up a hand and revealed a remote control, saying, "But before all of that, you are going to be wearing something special." He pushed a button, and various boxes, or rather, big suitcases, slid out from a side wall. Each of them had the name of a pupil. "Are those?" inquired Kaminari. All Might chuckled and said, "Why, they are your costumes, of course." The class went on to become ecstatic at that very moment. But Midoriya was the only one who didn't feel the same enthusiasm. He frowned at the suitcase bearing his name, more worried than anything else. They were all too eager to rush for their suitcase and chase after All Might to notice. The whole class assembled for what All Might had dubbed the battle trial 20 minutes later. They soon learned that Grounds B was a huge, possibly overly realistic, mock city. Students gathered at the grounds entrance and paused to praise one another's costumes. Uraraka raised an eyebrow at Midoriya and said, "Huh, that's not what I expected." Midoriya looked down at himself awkwardly and asked, Really?" His outfit consisted of a full-body jumpsuit, red boots, elbow and knee pads, and a red belt. A plain, mostly aesthetically pleasing black breather hung from his neck. In fact, his costume was probably too basic in comparison to some. Unfortunately, his mother had put her foot down and forbade him from having a hood, protrusions that resembled All Might, and a painted smile on the breather that mirrored All Might's. Midoriya would have had a completely different costume if she had had her say. Uraraka remarked, "I expected something more, foxy." "I like it. It is just like I don't know. Like, Iida dressing like a Gundam wing makes sense. He is half robot already." At that, Midoriya started to perspire. Was Uraraka unaware that Iida's outfit was modeled after his own hero family attire? She blushed and mumbled, "Maybe I shouldn't talk. It's not like I got what I wanted," while fumbling with her extremely tight costume. In response, Midoriya tried not to gawk, her face flushed with shame. "Quiet down and let us begin, shall we? First, allow me to explain the basics. Today, you will be randomly assigned into teams of 2. Then, also at random, one team shall act the part of villains whilst another shall be the heroes. The rest, while they wait their turn, shall watch and learn from their peers." All Might began to explain only to be interrupted by a raised hand. "Yes, Iida." Overly excited Iida asked, or rather yelled, "Sir, why can't we choose a companion that best suits us for each team?" Before he could stop himself, Midoriya interjected, I think that's the point, Iida. In real life most heroes don't get to choose who they work with. The best heroes, after all, are those who adapt best to their situation, including teammates. He blinked, then blushed and sputtered unintelligibly when he became aware that everyone was looking at him. All Might cleared his throat and exclaimed, yes, excellent answer young Midoriya. Iida also appeared pleased with the response. Now, where was I? Right, the challenge. For each battle, villains will protect a mock nuclear bomb and avoid heroes from recovering it. They win if the heroes fail to recover the weapon before the 15-minute mark or if they capture the heroes. Heroes, in turn, win if they recover the weapon or capture the villains. Midoriya scowled. Had All Might committed the whole explanation to memory? It sounded very much like it. He didn't mind. He was instructing them, and he was the #1 hero. To recover the weapon heroes only require to touch it. Capture is achieved by tying a target's hands with this tape that shall be provided to each fighter. He raised a tiny tape box. If I declare your capture, then you must step aside and not interfere. Other than that, you might engage in full combat with your adversaries. The majority of classmates were suddenly less excited, particularly after observing an ecstatic Bakugo making tiny explosions in his hands. Uraraka gulped at that, as Midoriya saw. There were others besides her. Others looked on in fear. Using your quirk against robots is one thing. Using it against classmates or being the target of someone else's quirk is quite another. Suyu questioned, are you sure that is a good idea, Ribbit? I understand your doubts, young ones, but you must understand this is the life you have chosen. Heroes require the ability to avoid serious harm coming to civilians or the villains. If you however feel the situation is overwhelming, you may surrender or ask for a pause, although I'll be the final judge of that. On the first sign of someone overreaching, I will intervene and stop the exercise. Cause undue harm, he glanced at Bakugo briefly, and you will be expelled. There was a prolonged period of silence. All Might declared, now, time for the draws. Being on the same team as Uraraka made Midoriya happy, but he questioned whether he could perform well with his face flushed. But when the teams were given their responsibilities, his happiness disappeared. All Might called out, first battle, Team A as heroes versus Team D as villains. Instead, that would be Midoriya and Uraraka against Iida and Bakugo. Before going to their assigned hiding place, Bakugo gave a terrified Team A one final murderous grin. While the rest of the class went to an observation room, Midoriya and Uraraka waited outside the tall building they had to enter. They needed to come up with a plan in 5 minutes. Uraraka, who was obviously wary, asked shakily, are you all right? Why yes, Midoriya nodded, then closed his eyes and said, okay, no, I am not, it had to be Kachan. When Uraraka called, Midoriya, Uraraka's sternly determined face made Midoriya jump back when he opened his eyes. Let us give our all and win this. After giving her a long look, Midoriya grinned and nodded. Yes, he said, glancing up at the structure, I want to win. Bakugo was probably waiting impatiently for the match to begin somewhere inside. He stated, we need a plan. Kneeling, Midoriya set down the blueprints for the alleged lair. This resolute teammate surprised Uraraka, who knelt across from him. They will put the bomb here. He put a finger there. Or rather, Iida will probably decide it is the best option. How can you know that? I know Kachan. He is driven, powerful and born for combat. However, Kachan is a terrible team player and likes fighting alone, so I believe he will force Iida to guard the bomb and come to hunt us. Iida, in turn, isn't an idiot. His quirk, engine, requires space for acceleration, and it is best to have mobility to escape the two of us if we overcome Kachan. So, he'll choose the biggest room in the top floor, where will takes us longest to reach. He'll also clear everything you can use with your zero-gravity quirk, he said, stroking his chin while examining Uraraka. Wow, I had no idea you were so intelligent, Uraraka grinned. Midoriya's face turned red and he spluttered incoherently, losing all sense of seriousness. Midoriya muttered, all right, I have to tell you about my quirk. As he looked down, he trailed off, it is called. Uraraka vowed, hey, it is okay. I won't laugh. We are teammates, right? That means we have to trust each other. Midoriya inhaled deeply. He sighed and regained his resolve. You are right. My quirk is called Nine-Tailed Fox. It allows me to take different forms, each with a set of strength and weaknesses. Uraraka speculated. Ah, you mean your fox boy form and your fox form, right? Shuddering, Midoriya uttered, and not just those, I have other forms too. I think I'll unlock 9, so far I've unlocked 5. The words, heroes, you may enter, reverberated throughout the battlefield. And Uraraka said, let's go. We don't have time to waste. With a nod, Midoriya trailed behind her. Uraraka retreated and let Midoriya lead them as they hurried inside and up to the first floor. He managed to commit the map schematics to memory somehow. They knew they needed to exercise caution after the first floor. They continued, whispering a plan to each other. They were shocked to hear no explosions reverberating throughout the structure. The silence was more worrisome than anything, actually. To Midoriya's horror, Bakugo was most likely waiting somewhere. Although that wasn't Bakugo's style, Midoriya wasn't going to undervalue him. They strode forward tentatively, squandering time by cautiously inspecting the hallways and corners. The two fictitious heroes needed to move quickly or risk losing due to caution. Midoriya whispered, there is no other way, then, we have to hurry. Midoriya changed into his nine-tailed form as Uraraka scowled at his teammate. He pricked his ears and listened intently. He gestured for Uraraka to follow him as he left. They started to trot after that. Why hadn't Midoriya used his quirk earlier, Uraraka wondered. She didn't realize she wasn't alone. Even Midoriya's sharp ears did not warn them enough when Bakugo struck. How were they able to? As they were sprinting past a corridor beside them, someone yelled, Deku. And then there was a violent explosion. The issue was that Midoriya had already crossed the corridor to their right by then. As a result, Uraraka was the only person targeted by a furious Bakugo that flew in their direction. Bakugo screamed, die, as his hand fell upon a terrified Uraraka. Boom. Bakugo's palm was on something hard and he stared in surprise. Was it hair? He stepped back, stunned, and saw a huge cocoon of sorts where he had landed an explosion. No, it was a ball brought on by enveloping tails, not a cocoon. With an explosive leap, he smiled maniacally as the tails parted. But when Bakugo saw the luminous slit eyes of a snarling Midoriya, standing directly behind a trembling Uraraka, his blood froze. Midoriya said, Uraraka, as his tails drew back behind him. Go find the bomb, he said, stepping in front of Uraraka. I'll join you shortly. Uraraka nodded shakily and fled. Bakugo was excited rather than intimidated. His smile, bordering on sadistic, was too short. Bakugo called, it's you and me, Deku. Do you think that now you have some stupid quirk you can do anything? You are pathetic. You can't beat me. Midoriya lowered his body, his ears flattening behind him. He appeared more like an animal than a human, poised to leap. The tips of the tails were pointed at the explosive boy as they hunched around Midoriya. Bakugo roared, come on, you worthless piece of shit. With a crazy smile. There was no need to repeat it to Midoriya. With deadly intent, his tails sprang forward and speared Bakugo. But there was no undoing the explosive boy. Bakugo slammed the second tail away from him after avoiding the first with practiced ease. With the promise of being skewered alive by the other tails, he leapt high in the air, propelled by explosions on his palms. Bakugo maintained his smile as he observed the tails embedded in the concrete floor and walls. Bakugo thought, so that's how he destroyed the worthless robots during the entrance exam. Horrible, I find it too slow. Bakugo roared, die, and launched himself at an exposed Midoriya. When the green-haired fox boy realized how vulnerable he was, he stared, paralyzed. He was immobile, his tails retracting. He simply lacked the battle instincts necessary to take action quickly. Bakugo threw Midoriya backwards with a powerful explosion to his stomach. Fortunately for Midoriya, he rolled back and stood up again, a hand gripping his charred stomach. With pain visible on his face, his snarling rage was no longer so menacing. What, you thought that now that you had some stupid-ass quirk you could beat me? Bakugo screamed. I've trained for this. Sweat, blood and even fucking tears. Years and years to make it here. Midoriya stooped to snarl at Bakugo. Tails prepared for another round of fire. Midoriya glared at the feisty teenager and thought, I'm not going to run. I'll get up and fight. Bakugo, I'm not weak anymore, and I'll prove to you that I am just as strong as All Might. Die. Bakugo exploded forward, shouting. Midoriya was more careful with his tails this time. He used 4, all of which someone with Bakugo's reflexes could easily avoid. But the fox boy didn't use his tails as he was ready to hit Midoriya again. Rather, he swung his razor-sharp claws. But it was an idiotic effort. Bakugo easily evaded the blow and exploded by slamming his two palms on either side of Midoriya's head. As anticipated, the attack left the fox boy stunned, his head ringing. Completely helpless, Bakugo struck once more, slapping Midoriya's stomach with another explosive blow. The boy with the green hair was flung backwards. The feisty teenager took a step back, enjoying the moment. Was it truly Midoriya's belief that he could defeat him? In response, Midoriya staggered to his feet and supported himself against the wall. His jumpsuit had a hole in it by that point, and the nasty burn there appeared to be excruciating. "You can't beat me, Deku. You can't win. Round face won't get past 4 eyes and you can't do shit to stop me," said Bakugo. With his tails poised to strike, Midoriya snarled once more before pausing to scowl at Bakugo. He seemed perplexed as he glanced down at his hands. This confused Bakugo, and he raised an eyebrow. "I'm fighting like this, but why? Bakugo is a skilled fighter, and I am aware that I will never be able to outmaneuver him. In contrast to my Quirk and me, he was born for battle, and his Quirk is for combat," Midoriya thought. He had to fight wisely and steer clear of some pointless altercations for the sake of long-standing rivalries. "What made me so foolish? I went out of Uraraka to battle Iida by myself." Midoriya scolded his own. "You shouldn't play All Might right now." Bakugo's temper flared as Midoriya hissed, "Maybe you were right. Maybe I can't beat you in combat. But I can win this." Midoriya's crazed expression subsided as the smile remained fixed on his face. His ears pricked up and his tails came back to stand behind him. Bakugo scowled. Midoriya smiled and said, "Come on, then, hit me." Bakugo was unaware of the nature of Midoriya's game. He shook his head rapidly and concentrated. It made no difference. Deku was the one. He wasn't going to do anything spectacular, was he? Bakugo chuckled. "Really? That's what you want? Then here I go." Ready to destroy Midoriya, Bakugo exploded forward. To Bakugo's growing indignation, the fox boy did not recoil. Rather, he maintained his defiant smirk. Deku had the audacity to sneer at him. That useless piece of shit was going to be killed by him. With his right arm drawn back, he prepared to punch hard. Deku, of all people, could not possibly avoid it. He was correct, of course, but Midoriya had no plans to avoid it. Midoriya's smirk turned into a grin, and he burst into a cloud of white smoke just as Bakugo was halfway through and had gathered too much momentum to stop, just when one would think it was impossible to react. Bakugo snapped his head behind him after landing far beyond the smoke cloud. When the smoke cleared, a brat, a childlike version of Midoriya's fox human form, albeit with one big fluffy tail, was standing there, smiling at him, in place of the fight-worthy fox boy. Chibi Midoriya laughed and squeaked, "Catch me if you can, Bakugo," before bolting off. "What the fuck," was the only thing Bakugo could say. He had no idea that a dummy version of the fox child was crawling away on the ceiling above him, heading directly for the bomb. Uraraka walked slowly into the spacious room before scurrying to the closest concrete pillar. Fortunately, there were plenty of them to conceal oneself behind. She saw the papier-mâché nuclear bomb nearby. Iida, dressed as a robot knight, stood guard in front of it. Uraraka whispered, "Midoriya, I found the bomb," into her ear communicator. "Yeah, I can see that." Behind him, Uraraka heard a squeaky voice that almost made him scream. Fortunately, she was able to keep her mouth shut. A child was laughing right behind her. "Not a kid, please." When she recognized Midoriya, her brown eyes grew wide. The dark green hair, fur, and freckles, along with the one tail and a kid-sized version of his costume, shouted Midoriya. Uraraka was thinking of just one word right now. God, he is so adorable. Uraraka gave a mental squeal. He resembled a hugging stuffed animal with his enormous fox tears, whiskers, and fluffy tail the size of his body. Uraraka hesitated, though, because of the wound on his stomach, which was visible on an exposed part of what appeared to be a green onesie. "Midoriya?" Uraraka inquired hesitantly. "Shish, child," said Midoriya. He checked to see if Iida was still preoccupied. The bespectacled teenager appeared to be speaking to Bakugo, or at least attempting to. "Yep, this is my two-tailed form," Uraraka said. "Two-tailed. But you have one tail." Her gaze returned to his wound. "Are you alright? That wound looks bad." Midoriya clarified, "That's because in this form I split in two, you know. My other half is taunting Bakugo away from here and yeah, I'm alright. I can handle a bit of pain, you know." Uraraka found the child's bright smile charming. How exactly did Midoriya become such a cute animal? Uraraka was embarrassed because she knew this young boy was a teenager of 15, but she couldn't help but smile. Uraraka couldn't resist petting the adorable toddler, saying, "Oh, aren't you the bravest and cutest little fox boy around here?" Before the girl's hand reached his ears and began to scratch them, Midoriya appeared irritated. With his tail wriggling with delight, Midoriya purred, "Yes, yes I am." He jerked himself to his senses and seized the offending hand. Flustered, he muttered, "And now isn't the time for that." "Right, the bomb." Uraraka slapped her cheek and nodded. "What now?" "Simple," smiled Midoriya. His thumbs up said, "You distract Iida and I get the bomb." Uraraka, resisting the impulse to smother the adorable toddler in an embrace, responded with a thumbs up of her own. Meanwhile, Iida had stopped attempting to get in touch with Bakugo. Rather, he was furiously ranting about his evil teammates and Bakugo's stupidity for simply leaving him. However, they were meant to be horrible villains, right? Iida hummed, "Maybe I should embrace my villain side, right, that's it. I must embrace my inner villainy. Yes, I shall be the epitome of evil. Bwahahaha. PFFFT. Under his helmet, flushed with shame, Iida jerked his head in the direction of the door. He had neglected to maintain his focus on the entrance. "Who goes there? Reveal yourself." Uraraka moved from behind a pillar, suppressing her laughter. Iida demanded, "Stop laughing. I am evil." Uraraka appeared to roll down in laughter at that. At that, Iida's eyebrows shot up. Perhaps there was something he had to do that only a villain would do, but what? It was time for a monologue, you see. That would buy him some time, wouldn't it? "Ha ha, laugh to your heart's content, hero, but you won't stop me. For you see, I have prepared myself for this very encounter. I have removed any objects that may have served against me. Moreover, this room was strategically chosen to maximize my movement," Iida exclaimed. Fortunately, Uraraka did nothing but observe. Iida's eyebrow went up. Why didn't she rush toward him? Everything appeared to be a diversion. He cautiously paced the room, peering behind the bare gray room's pillars. He asked, "Where is Midoriya?" "He is diverting Bakugo's attention," Uraraka retorted innocently. Iida narrowed her eyes. Hold on, what was her peculiarity once more? Yes, the Infinity Girl took the gravity off of whatever she touched. Wait, no gravity, that might indicate that. Iida jerked his head up. Fortunately, Midoriya was not visible to him floating up there. However, he was startled to discover what appeared to be a young fox named Midoriya scuttling across the ceiling like a spider. Iida was startled and cried, "Midoriya, is that you?" The child looked down in surprise as he froze. Yes, Midoriya, a young fox, was stuck to the ceiling in some way. It was that, of course. Hold on, Uraraka. Iida looked down and saw Uraraka running full speed toward him. He saw Midoriya leaping directly to the bomb when he looked up. This was worthy of one answer. Tactical retreat, Iida declared. As Iida reached the other side of the room, he snatched up the bomb and sped off, leaving Midoriya to fall to the ground and Uraraka to gape in shock. Uraraka helped the toddler up and asked, "Are you all right, Midoriya?" Iida saw what Bakugo could only have done to the boy as he rubbed his stomach. The child sniffed, I think I scratched myself." "Oh," Uraraka crooned, "don't worry." "Wait, the bomb," cried Midoriya. He glanced at Iida, who was delivering a distant lecture or monologue. Unfortunately for Iida, they could hardly understand what he was saying. "What are we going to do? He is too fast," Uraraka responded, "and we are running out of time." An idea struck Midoriya, and he froze. His gaze slowly shifted to Uraraka. "IIC can distract him but," he said. "Please promise me you won't get mad at me," he said, looking as pale as a ghost. He pouted after that. "Who am I kidding? I'll commit seppuku after this." With confusion, Uraraka inquired, "What exactly do you have in mind?" Midoriya muttered, Just run to the bomb while I distract Iida." "Let's go." Uraraka beckoned. "Wait," but the toddler fox ignored him. He hurried over to Iida. "Heroes, your efforts are futile." Iida chuckled. Iida readied himself for another tactical withdrawal as they got closer to the bomb. He picked up the bomb. Just as he turned to flee, Midoriya, who was still at least 10 meters away, leapt into the air. "Uraraka, run and don't look back." Poof. As the white cloud dissipated and Midoriya unveiled a new form, Iida was obediently watching, prepared to speed away. Naturally, Midoriya had discovered a very effective way to divert the fictitious villain. In fact, Iida completely forgot about the bomb in an instant. Even better, Iida hardly had time to think as he gazed at the new form. His eyes were on the verge of exploding from their sockets. Was this thing for real? There were numerous pairs of eyes in a similar state back in the observation room. "Please, don't stare at me like that," a small female voice whispered sensuously. The most beautiful woman Iida had ever seen was standing where the child Midoriya had leapt. She was tall, had an hourglass figure, and half of her face was covered by her long dark green hair. As an arm attempted to conceal her enormous bosom, 4 tails wiggled behind her rather large butt. The worst thing, her breasts threatened to rip Midoriya's already torn jumpsuit. The worst part wasn't that. Almost nothing was left to the imagination, and the worst part was how much tighter the jumpsuit had become with the obviously taller new form. From the immorality of it all to the sheer ridiculousness of using such a form against him, Iida had 1,000 lectures in his head. But all that came out of Iida's mouth was a lengthy string of unintelligible splutter. She purred sensuously while winking and blowing a kiss, saying, "Don't worry, Iida, I don't bite." Iida couldn't tell if his eyes were deceiving him, but he thought a fist-sized heart, the kind that cartoons use to represent love, was flying directly at him. Nevertheless, it hit him hard in his shock. What had struck him? Iida didn't know, but it certainly had an impact on him. Iida could no longer even think, whereas previously he could hardly form a word. His normally respectful eyes took on a life of their own, and his already hot blood grew hotter, promising to boil in his vessels. Blood began to flow less to the brain and more to, well, other parts, to make things even more embarrassing. His body was no longer entirely under his control. Had some sort of zombifying power struck him? Why am I unable to move? Why am I salivating? Iida pondered, appalled at his body's inaction. It felt like he was watching from inside his own body. And boy did he have a front row seat to that unquestionably gorgeous and seductive. "You are superior to this, Tenya," he thought frantically. He noticed Fox Midoriya sigh, appearing embarrassed and a little agitated. She let go of the sensual position, clearly grateful that she had caught Iida in whatever it was that had struck him. Uraraka's stunned expression caused Midoriya to turn sideways and then leap back. In that annoyingly captivating voice, the woman exclaimed, "Uraraka, you were supposed to rush to the bomb." "Oh, right," spluttered Uraraka, flushed. "I can't lose like this, please." Iida yelled, "Tenya, fight it, no drooling pervert you are." However, it was pointless. The most obscene things were all he could think of. "Tenya, get up and fight. Here, your honor is on the line. Consider the important things. Keep your attention on what matters most in life." A hand rose slowly. 5 meters separated us from Uraraka. Iida's mind cleared and he felt control return to his limb. Iida cried out, "By the mighty power of the rules, I compel you." Slap. Iida slapped himself, and Midoriya and Uraraka blinked at him. As Iida dropped to her knees, free of her 4 tails special move, Midoriya let out a startled gasp. Sensing that her time was limited, Uraraka dashed in the direction of the bomb. Iida laughed, "No so fast, heroes," and managed to get away just in time. Uraraka said, "Damn it, I was so close," as he collapsed where the big bomb had been. "Time is running out," woman Midoriya declared. Squinting at Iida nearby, she knelt beside Uraraka. Uraraka said, perplexed and a little irritated, "You can shoot him that, what the heck was that you did to Iida?" Woman Midoriya smirked and purred, "I call it my pheromone strike, dear," but then frowned at her own statement. She laughed while covering her face in the most feminine way imaginable. "Sorry about that, Uraraka, these stupid forms are a bit out of control," she said. Uraraka was unable to look away from the woman kneeling next to her. To think that a young adolescent, a male adolescent at that, was the intended target. Was this a real female personality in there, or was Midoriya just acting? And the sex appeal, what the devil was it? Midoriya pouted, her lush features twisting in what Uraraka could only describe as an alluring face. "Unfortunately, Mr. Handsome Robot Boy appears to have broken out of my pheromone strike. Not that I am surprised, I rarely play in this form so my powers are still unrefined." "Damn it," she slapped herself and hissed. "Did I just call Iida Mr. Handsome Robot Boy? Uraraka, I've got a plan, but we must be quick." "Explosive ass. I mean, Bakugo, must have figured out I am here and we mustn't have much time left," whispered Midoriya. In turn, Iida was attempting to recover from the previous assault. His heart continued to pound and his blood continued to boil. What could Midoriya possibly be capable of? He had watched the green-haired boy change into a fox, then a fox kid, and finally a gorgeous fox woman. What else did Midoriya have to offer? After concluding their private conversation, Uraraka and Midoriya walked slowly over to Iida. They were glared at by the engine user. Even though his eyes were currently stifling inside his helmet, he was grateful that he still had one because they were shamefully wandering off across Midoriya's body. With her sensual voice, Midoriya hummed, "Okay, sweetheart, I have to use my most dangerous form now. It is nothing personal, you handsome robot boy." When woman Midoriya winked at Iida, he felt a chill go down his spine, but he was ashamed that it wasn't a chill of fear. The brief moment was cut short when Midoriya exploded into a thin smoke cloud. Iida tensed, ready to take on whatever Midoriya threw at him. Not that Iida cared all that much, but I hoped it wouldn't be another attractive fox woman. Iida became aware that whatever Midoriya had done to him had subsided as he leaned forward, prepared to run. He was back in charge of his body and his decent-minded mind. The room reverberated with laughter. Iida and Uraraka gaped in confusion as the cloud disappeared, revealing Midoriya, a teenage girl. Fortunately, this one was the same age as Uraraka and Iida, and she had 3 tails in her rear. This Midoriya had a dark green pixie cut and a smile that bordered on conceit. Compared to the previous Midnight lookalike, this form had a more Kyokujiro-like body form, which was more significant for the still agitated Iida. "You are screwed now, 4 eyes." Midoriya yelled sadistically. This form is the hottest one yet. Real fire erupted from his hands as if to illustrate a point. Iida watched in awe as blue flames lit her own tails and spread across the fox's arms. To his mounting fear, Midoriya merely chuckled. At that moment, Iida was reminded of Bakugo and shuddered in terror. But the way the flames spread toward Midoriya's stomach and gathered over his wounds struck Iida as strange. But then, Iida had more important things to worry about right now. "Be careful," Uraraka exclaimed dramatically, shielding her face and moving to the side as though the fire were too fierce. Iida exclaimed, "You have pyrokinesis now," quite loudly. Midoriya merely chuckled. Iida saw a wall of flames rise on his right as she waved his left hand. Iida's gaze expanded. Midoriya made another one on his left before he knew it. Uraraka begged, "Maybe we should stop. This is becoming dangerous." Midoriya said, "In your dreams, cute face." She winked at her teammate, but Iida didn't see it. "Charge." Iida gasped in surprise as the flaming fox girl raced in his direction. He glanced at his sides. He was confined. Even worse, Midoriya was drawing near with even more ferocity. Midoriya shouted, "Uraraka now," and pointed his hands at Iida. "Deku," roared a familiar, irate voice. Iida could hear All Might telling Midoriya to get down even from where he was standing. However, it was too late. Iida watched in horror as flames flew in his direction and engulfed him in a lethal embrace. He screamed and began rolling on the ground, the only thing he could do to stay alive. He didn't want to pass away that way. How could he be burned alive by Midoriya? Was he insane? Was he? Iida halted her roll and blinked at the ceiling in confusion. He examined himself. He felt nothing at the same time that he was burning. In fact, he became increasingly aware that the flames weren't even warm as he sat there waiting to experience pain. The fire vanished in an instant, and Iida felt a horrible knot form in her stomach. With a gasp, Iida jerked his head in the direction of the bomb. All Might declared, "The heroes have recovered the weapon. The hero team wins." Uraraka and Midoriya stood by the bomb, a hand on the blasted thing. They both had big smiles on their faces. As soon as the news was announced, Midoriya leapt onto Uraraka and gave the vivacious girl a hug. "We won," the girls shouted with joy. But Iida was still too stunned by what had transpired. Midoriya turned to Iida as the girls released their embrace, leaving one small brunette blushing. With her hands on her neck, she approached him while flashing her teeth in a toothy smile. Midoriya offered to help and apologized, "Sorry about that, robot boy. I didn't scare you too much with the fire, did I?" After accepting the hand, Iida was unexpectedly pulled up by a sudden burst of strength. Midoriya, the girl, was stronger than she appeared. Iida also noticed that this form was shorter than the non-fox Midoriya as he gazed down at the girl. Only smooth, unscarred skin was visible, along with the open, tattered hole that had revealed a severe injury on Midoriya's stomach. In what way had Midoriya healed herself, or herself? Iida was going to find this confusing, wasn't she? I'll admit, I was concerned about my health for a moment there, Iida admitted. He lowered his head. I will concede it was a spectacularly clever move on your part. The girl gave Iida a back pat and exclaimed, you were pretty amazing too, robot boy. Sorry about the whole Four Tails thing, she added sheepishly. Iida whispered, just, don't do it again. All Might yelled, both teams, come to the observation room. Ha! In your face, bitch. Midoriya chuckled and gestured toward the door. Bakugo was kneeling there in shock. The fox girl gave him a slightly too savage laugh. But Uraraka and Iida were a little nervous about the tumultuous teen. The fox girl abruptly staggered back, moaning and clutching her head, so the moment was short. She suddenly lost her energy and appeared as though she was about to pass out. Female Midoriya muttered, "Ugh, I'm going to have a migraine with so many transformations." With a renewed smile, she glanced at the ceiling. I wonder what All Might thought about the fight. The awkward statement, it was, well, an interesting fight, came from All Might. They were assembled in a large, dark, empty room with a wall of monitors. All Might's observation room, with its own console and monitors, was to the side, concealed behind a door. Why had he separated himself from the others to supervise the fights? Nobody was aware. However, at that moment, every student was present with the number one hero, prepared to receive a verbal assessment of their battle. With the exception of three-tailed Midoriya, who was leaping with delight and excitement, they all stood there, enjoying the company of such a hero. Despite her lively demeanor, she snorted and had bags under her eyes, giving the impression that she was about to collapse. I was freaking awesome, exclaimed girl Midoriya, her fists up. Behind her, her tails wiggled joyfully. Cute Face and Robot Boy were awesome too. They discovered a clawed arm around their necks and pulled together to a happy three-tailed fox named Midoriya, much to the embarrassment of Iida and Uraraka. Both of them flushed. Why was there so much touching during this Midoriya? The rest of the class was torn between being genuinely confused and being amused. Ashido Mina tried to contain her laughter as she said, "Say, Midori, what is it with you, being so many people?" All Might cleared his throat and interrupted, "You will have to ask Midoriya about his quirk later. So, who can tell me who the best out there was?" Yaoyorozu immediately raised her hand to call attention to herself. According to Yaoyorozu, it was Iida. He remained focused on the task at hand and adapted the best against his opponents. The choice of rune for the bomb and the prior preparation to his engagement in battle proves he took into account his own strengths and weaknesses as well as his opponents. This allowed him to gain time when the heroes made it to the bomb. Three-tailed Midoriya chuckled and gave Iida a back pat. "Not bad, Robot Boy," she exclaimed. The statement, "Correct and well said, young Yaoyorozu," was made by All Might. To the others, "You performed well, young Uraraka and young Midoriya. You prioritized your mission, acted as a team and adapted well." However, here he breathed deeply, "Young Uraraka, next time do try to take the exercise with more seriousness. There were a few times you ruined your team's chances of victory by laughing or staring. You will find many shocking or surprising things in your career, and thus can't allow them to distract you." Uraraka's face dropped. Midoriya smiled and gave her a supportive squeeze on the shoulder. But when the fox girl saw the expression on All Might's face, her focus swiftly returned to him. Her tails ceased to wag, and her fox ears flattened. He didn't want to see that face from his hero. Even worse, Midoriya knew he would not like what was going to happen. "Young Midoriya," All Might began, then let out a disappointed sigh. "Why is your quirk registry so lacking in details? It is truly shameful you dared venture into a fight, ready to use your quirk against your fellow classmates, without even providing sufficient warning to the faculty. As a teacher, I need to assess potential risks for such delicate exercises." Midoriya's shoulders slumped as she grimaced. It was painful to know who was reprimanding him or her, not because he was being reprimanded. "It hurts, All Might, his idol." It was Uraraka's turn to console this time. However, All Might wasn't finished for Midoriya. "You didn't tell your teammate about your abilities, and even worse, it appeared that you were hesitant to use your quirk. You came into the building in your most helpless form, and you only used the nine-tailed form to fight Bakugo. I admire your bravery, but it was a stupid idea to stand up when you could have easily tricked him. You did get past him, but only after you were already hurt. I don't support you using your tails and claws in your altercation with young Bakugo. You would have crippled young Bakugo beyond recovery girl's capacity if he had been any less of a fighter. It was fortunate that young Bakugo is such a skilled fighter because you would have been kicked out otherwise, All Might roared. Despite her knowledge that Bakugo would not only avoid him but also likely defeat him in his nine-tailed form, Midoriya winced as if she had been physically harmed. That fierceness you showed, it was genuinely unworthy of a hero. In the face of evil, a hero must be brave and defiant. It may be sufficient to show confidence, but to behave like a furious animal. All Might cried passionately. Not at all. I advise you, young man, to control your anger before it becomes a problem later on. With a grimace, Midoriya gazed at the floor in despair. Finally, I'll need to let your homeroom teacher know about these forms you have. You seem to lack control over them, which is indicative of inexperience and can undoubtedly be harmful. Finally, All Might delivered the final blow to Midoriya's pride by saying, next time, do try to rein in these alternative personas of yours. All Might then moved to a corner of a room where Bakugo stood, apathetically staring and swearing as far away from the rest of the class as he could, seemingly ignoring them all. Now, young Bakugo, All Might uttered after inhaling deeply. Bakugo sneered, yeah, I screw up. I know what I did wrong. Are you now? Share it with the class, All Might asked, raising an eyebrow. Bakugo was dreadfully silent. The students stared at All Might with trepidation as his normally honest tone took on a terrifyingly harsh edge when he said, then allow me to list your failures in this exercise. First, you didn't just abandon a teammate, you ignored him from the start, All Might said. Furthermore, you wandered off to a confusing base and ignored any attempts at communication from young Iida. What would have happened if you had completely missed the hero team? Would you have been waiting for them to walk by you, or would you have been exploring the area? Bakugo frowned but remained silent. Secondly, you underestimated your opponents because of your conceit. Even worse, you became distracted by your own mission because of battle lust or a personal grudge. When young Midoriya regained the ability to use his quirk, he played you like a fiddle. I'm not sure what you were trying to prove, but violence isn't always the only way to win a fight. Bakugo clenched his fists in rage and hissed, exposing his teeth, but he kept his head down. Third, your lack of self-control disgusts me. Uraraka grimaced at the memory, then turned to face a comforting Midoriya. Hadn't young Midoriya acted in time, I fear what might have happened. I did not miss the fact that you aimed straight to young Uraraka's head in your initial engagement. Bakugo spat, I wasn't about to kill her. No, but she could have suffered a broken neck at worst and a concussion at the very least from such a powerful explosion to the face and at such close range. Even though Recovery Girl's strangeness is miraculous, it does not justify your lack of concern for your classmates' well-being. All Might remarked, I must admit, I never expected to witness such violence as you displayed against young Midoriya. You had multiple opportunities to capture him, but instead you decided to use your quirk and cause harm. That is really disgusting. Bakugo tried to project a dismissive air, but his classmates could tell he was on the verge of blowing up. All Might gave the explosive teenager a pointed look, but the boy chose to growl at the ground and keep his hands in his pockets. The next team, then, All Might declared. With little knowledge of Midoriya, Uraraka and Iida had kind of expected a different response, but it was evident that, even though he remained in that tailed form, she sure seemed to keep an undaunted disposition, different from his human form, that is. Uraraka and Iida turned to Midoriya, ready to comfort the poor boy-turned-girl, but instead they found her smiling and wagging her tail carelessly. Todoroki and Shoji filed out while Midoriya stretched a little, her smile unwavering. The green-haired fox girl paused when she noticed a scared Hagakure and a nervous Ojiro trailing behind the first pair, and she felt sorry for them because they had all witnessed Todoroki's insane ice powers. Hey, tail boy, invisible girl. Midoriya hopped over to them and called out happily. The rest of the class stared, a little perplexed by such a happy fox girl, wondering how she could have remained so happy after All Might's severe reprimand. The Midoriya they had met the day before was nothing like that happy and self-assured girl. She leaned between the two and whispered something, and Ojiro and Hagakure paused, their faces plastered with dumbfounded expressions. Please, go to Villain Lair B, All Might's voice said, young Ojiro, young Hagakure. Good luck, everyone. After giving the hero pair a pat, Midoriya turned around and leapt away. What was the purpose of that? As Midoriya walked up to Uraraka, she asked. Midoriya laughed and froze, then frowned, just being an awesome person. Enough of this, she said. Iida and Uraraka exchanged bewildered looks, and then Midoriya went poof, revealing a very familiar green-haired human boy who collapsed to his knees and began to hyperventilate. The fact that I used the four-tailed form is astounding. Paling, he moaned. Are you okay, Midoriya? Uraraka pondered. I am so sorry guys. Midoriya muttered, tears streaming down his cheeks. This is awful. I simply, when I am. The green-haired boy was beginning to worry Iida and Uraraka. What's the problem, Midoriya? Do you need medical assistance? Iida asked. Or ought we to get psychological support? Are you angry? He asked hesitantly. Iida and Uraraka exchanged puzzled glances as they scowled. What would make us upset? Uraraka pondered. Midoriya groaned. I was terrible. My quirk. It is terrible. What? It's pretty cool, in my opinion. You seem to have a lot of peculiarities all at once. That is really awesome, Uraraka stated. Iida said, for its applications, of course, before his cheeks began to flush. Yes, I think it is an impressive quirk. I take it that you're not saying that because you're infatuated with sexy Midoriya. Uraraka was teased. Absurd. Not at all, Iida screamed, his charcoal-red face releasing puffs of steam as he karate-sliced the air in desperation. Startled, Midoriya got to his feet and looked at the two while Uraraka continued to giggle and tease Iida. Did they truly enjoy his eccentricity? Midoriya grimaced. Then again, he muttered to himself, they have no idea what it's like. Oh Midori, called a well-known sing-song voice. He should have known better than to use his quirk, but Midoriya shuddered long before Mina Ishido and the others surrounded him, and he looked at them in horror. Ishido stumbled, do you need something? Yes, we are eager to learn more about your peculiarity. I have never seen a quirk like that, exclaimed the pink-skinned girl, who was bouncing and appeared excited. You transform into different individuals. Or do they have distinct personalities? Is it an illusion or do you truly transform into a woman? Yaoyorozu asked inquisitively. What makes them behave so differently than you? Sato inquired. As the four-tailed girl visible, Kaminari Denki nodded eagerly beside Mineta as he begged, drooling. Stuttering, Midoriya said, please, I. Enough. Iida stepped in and told them to keep their distance and take things one at a time. He should be treated with some respect because he is a classmate. He pointed to a suddenly pale Mineta and said, avoid such a flurry of questions and you. I would not want me to tell Aizawa about it, but I would rather not speculate your intentions. A sweating Mineta stammered, I just was, in a way that was strangely similar to human Midoriya. Heroes can come in, the loud voice of All Might interrupted, directing their focus to the screen. Everyone turned to watch the action, fortunately for Midoriya. Todoroki and Shoji stood calmly outside the building for a moment, and then Shoji said something to Todoroki, who stepped forward without looking at his teammate, apparently asking him to stay behind. Then, Todoroki literally froze the building. But more shocking was what had happened to the villains. Todoroki marched in and walked down the corridors in triumph. Who could blame him? He had shown an amazing display of raw power. Ojiro and Hagakure hadn't stood a chance. Everyone stared in shock at the power they had witnessed, but then again, they had seen Todoroki ride walls of ice during the 50-meter run or use suddenly sprouting pillars of ice to throw the softball. He seems a little cocky there, don't you think? Honta made a point. Asui noted, he probably thinks he froze the villains, ribbit. He won't anticipate it, will he? Kaminari made a joke. Indeed, they returned with All Might 4 minutes later, prepared to give a battle evaluation, with a triumphant Ojiro and Hagakure exchanging victory smiles with a bewildered Todoroki standing next to a dejected Shoji. No matter what kind of quirk you have, don't underestimate your opponent. All Might shook his head, disappointed. I thought you had learned from young Bakugo. However, how did you manage not to get frozen? I wondered, Todoroki said. All right, Midoriya told us you would probably do something crazy like that and stay on our toes at the beginning just in case, Hagakure acknowledged, so we kind of expected as much. Midoriya was grateful that she did not bring up the fact that he had pointed out that Todoroki's left side was the weakest and most vulnerable. Midoriya shrugged, but Ojiro smiled apologetically and said, considering just how you overdid things yesterday, we kind of saw where he was coming from. We did not expect you to freeze the entire building, though. All Might glared at Todoroki and said, it doesn't matter. You did exactly what I reprimanded Bakugo for. Actually, I was hoping for more from you. You're fortunate that we haven't begun considering collateral damage yet. The rest of the fights continued in a similar fashion after seeing Hagakure and Ojiro's quick battle against Todoroki, in which Hagakure distracted Todoroki by grabbing him by his left side and gave her team enough time for Ojiro to deliver a knockout kick. Instead of charging head-on, hero teams used stealth, while the villains tried to use subterfuge, traps, and surprise tactics. Ultimately, Hagakure was deemed the best fighter in the fight because of her stealth when she was shivering. While Kyoka demonstrated the spying capabilities of her earphone jacks, Tokiyami's dark shadow proved stronger than the day before, and others, like Asui with her frog mutation quirk and Koji with his animal controlling quirk, had to get creative, while others, like Kirishima with his hardening quirk, had to make the most of what they had. Midoriya watched as everyone tried to figure out clever ways to use their quirks for combat, which was obviously different from doing physical exercises in public. Actually, Midoriya enjoyed watching quirks in action. He observed their movements and actions, mentally planning to write numerous entries in his favorite notebooks. The mere thought of it thrilled him, but he was discouraged as he watched his classmates fight because he couldn't compete with them if he couldn't accept his own quirk. Furthermore, Midoriya observed that, in contrast to him, each of them had found the style that worked best for their peculiarities. None of them attempted to emulate All Might, instead concentrating on their own advantages and disadvantages. None of them were attempting to prove anything, and they all performed admirably with what they had. Todoroki had been shaken by his defeat, and so, instead of being cold and distant, he remained mostly dumbfounded and furious. His classmates wisely kept a wide berth from him as he silently raged. The day ended with everyone enjoying their performance, with some feeling depressed by their losses and others grateful they had won. Bakugo was the one who seemed most eager to leave the class, though that had become a given. Since everyone wanted to talk about their own fight, Midoriya was grateful that people quickly forgot about his quirk and weren't bothered by it. He managed to leave the school without anyone bringing it up, possibly because they sensed he wasn't comfortable discussing it. He believed he heard his classmates discussing it in whispers with Iida and Uraraka, but they tried to look away when they saw Midoriya. As he left Ua and headed for the train station, the green-haired boy grimaced at his own performance, mentally reviewing the humiliating display of his quirk and, now that he was no longer in the three-tailed form's state of perpetual joy and confidence, All Might's scathing critique. Even though he had been right about everything and it was his responsibility to point out Izuku's shortcomings, it still hurt to think about All Might's words. Midoriya's idol, whom he had long admired, might as well have been Texas smashed. He wanted to think he still looked up to him, but after the well-earned reprimand, Midoriya had to face the reality. All Might, for all his greatness and titles, was a human, and All Might was not some god to gaze upon with awe. I am so focused on admiring All Might that I never think about myself. What did I expect? To be praised by him after being my typical pitiful self? I am a true Deku. It would have been foolish to engage Bakugo, especially since he didn't even know how to throw a punch, but hindsight was 20/20, and it was easier to say what should have been done after it was over than to actually do it at the time. He should have used the two-tailed form earlier, or even the four tails on Bakugo. He should have informed Uraraka from the beginning and planned their strategy based on his quirk's abilities. Perhaps he wouldn't have to worry about his own limitations or embarrassing himself if he had a good quirk, like Bakugo's or All Might's. Perhaps, just possibly, he would be the strong, inspirational hero he aspired to be, rather than Nine-Tailed Fox, that pitiful circus of embarrassing personalities. At least he had enough now to write full entries about his classmates. Midoriya sighed, but should he leave blank pages? He truly wanted to write about those incredible peculiarities he had witnessed, if only he had any of them. A few paces away from him, absorbed in her own thoughts, was a weary-looking rabbit girl, and he looked up and, to his surprise, saw a familiar pair of white rabbit ears. Midoriya thought, should I talk to her? But quickly pushed the idea away, reminded of the teasing from that morning and the foolish use of it in his four-tailed form, which still made him cringe. Why did he do that? He still couldn't believe Iida hadn't been upset with him for it. He was a few feet away from Rabbit Girl, whatever her name was, and he stared at her, wondering about her quirk. He had written a lot about it, but right now, Midoriya's thoughts were focused on other things, like how her mutation quirk affected her relationships in her early childhood. Midoriya wondered if, like the others, I had grown accustomed to my quirk. There was a part of him that wished he had shown his quirk sooner, that his childhood would have been easier, that he might still have been friends with Bakugo, that he might have made more friends, or even that he might not have been looked down upon and bullied by his peers. But he was aware that even people with quirks were targeted. Midoriya had been teased not only because he didn't have any quirks, but also because he had a ridiculous fantasy of being a hero without any quirks. His muttering, obsession with quirks, nerdy personality, and plain creepy behavior had made it easy for people to find something to annoy him. Who was to say they wouldn't have started calling him names other than Deku? Perhaps he would have been called Weirdo, Freak Show, or One-Man Circus, it's difficult to tell. Looking up at the evening sky, Midoriya wondered how he was supposed to be like All Might, smiling while saving people, when his only weapons of choice might be slyness and cunning rather than courage and strength. Would he have to forge his own path or be like All Might at all? Aizawa appeared as worn out and sour as ever on this brand new, revitalizing day in Ua. Was he even asleep? Having been traumatized on the first day, the students watched in silence as their teacher started the day. Rather than say anything, however, the man paused to examine each one of them critically. A significant event was about to occur. Midoriya swallowed. Was his performance the previous day a factor? But he wasn't the only one perspiring. Kaminari and Mineta appeared on the verge of a panic attack. Uraraka's fingernails were bitten. Iida and Yaoyorozu tried to maintain their composure as they gazed at their teacher. Everyone held their breath in anticipation. Would anyone be kicked out? Did he think any of them were not worthy of going on? They were going crazy from the suspense. Aizawa yawned and finally said, "Morning everyone." He squinted at his students and made several of them gulp as he said, "I watched the video of yesterday's battle trial. Let me say, you all did acceptable." Class 1A gazed at their homeroom teacher in blankness. Didn't we? They all thought at the same time. To be honest, they had anticipated some more abrasive remarks than that. It was your first attempt on a hero-villain battle, so I can't say I had any expectations to begin with, Aizawa sighed. Otherwise I would have expelled half of you based on yesterday's ridiculous displays of stupidity, negligence, arrogance and sheer irrationality, while sending the rest to general studies. The class broke out in sweat. They had learned to know that Aizawa now. He leaned forward and squinted at them, saying, "I have some pointers for each of you, but that will have to wait. There is something of utmost importance to do first." His voice became almost menacing. "Something that will affect your futures in UA while you don't fail to meet my expectations." Oh no, this is awful. The pupils join in mental chorus. What might it be? A dismissal? One more test? Please, don't give me another test. Aizawa told them, "You must choose a class representative and vice representative." Puzzled, everyone looked at their homeroom teacher. Is that all? God damn it, he had to make it so tense, but why? "I don't care how you do it, just get it done before your first class," said Aizawa. With that said, "I'll go to sleep," he added after yawning. He got up and unfolded a sleeping bag he had hidden beneath the instructor's desk. What his students were seeing was unbelievable. Meanwhile, Midoriya scowled and began to reflect. He considered their options while ignoring the animated antics of his classmates. Kyoka said, "So how will we decide?" "Voting." Bakugo stood on his desk, shouting, "Forget it, extras." While detonating bombs, "I declare myself class representative." Asui ignored Bakugo and remarked, "But we barely know each other, Ribbit." Bakugo yelled, "Oi, I declared myself representative, frog face." With urgency. "I don't know. I think we know enough of everyone, right?" Sato replied. Bakugo yelled, "Hey, diabetes man, do you wanna die?" Yaoyorozu sounded unsure as he asked hesitantly, "Does anyone know what are the responsibilities involved with being class representative?" Bakugo shouted, "Who cares? The class representative is the top dog and that means," but was cut off. Kirishima said, "I don't know, but it sounds really manly." But he scratched his head and scowled. Does he even do anything or is just some title? "Fuck you, extras," screamed Bakugo, flushed. "I think he or she has to deal with any events, help organize stuff and, other stuff, I think." "Never had one in my middle school," replied Siro. "Why you little?" Bakugo growled, seething. Ashido yelled, "It sounds fun. Pick me, pick me. I propose Iida as our representative and Yaoyorozu as second." Everyone, including Bakugo, turned to face Midoriya, who instantly spluttering incoherently and shrinking in his seat in embarrassment. Uraraka said, "Don't you want to be class representative, Midoriya?" Well, yeah, was the apprehensive response from the boy with green hair. "But I know I'm a nervous wreck with people and I don't think I could handle responsibilities, not like Iida at least. He has proven to be smart, methodical and dedicated, like Yaoyorozu. At least, that's my impression from what I've noticed. The difference is that Iida is, well, Midoriya struggled to suppress a grin. More enthusiastic, maybe a bit too enthusiastic. Mineta questioned, are you sure he is a good choice? The guy can be intense, you know. The class representative probably entails many responsibilities and I really don't see anyone of us being better at fulfilling such a role than, well, Iida, replied Midoriya. He surveyed the area. Would anyone spend time from homework or training to do something boring like meeting with other representatives or organize mundane matters? I mean, it is nice to be representative and all, but it does have boring tasks attached to it, right? Most of them appeared to be discouraged from aspiring to be class representatives as a result. All eyes were on him, much to Midoriya's astonishment. It was quite embarrassing, even though it felt good to be recognized. Ashido hummed, yeah, I can definitely see Iida doing paperwork. With vigor, Uraraka declared, Midoriya is right. Iida is perfect for the job. Look, he even has the glasses. He looks the part, doesn't he? Yaoyorozu too looks the part. Midoriya whispered, that isn't a requirement for the position. Oi, extras. Everyone looked at the explosive blonde with a frown. He glared back at them, or more specifically, at Midoriya. Bakugo yelled, are you really going to do what Deku tells you? Mineta grinned and said, that must really piss you off, huh? I second Midoriya's proposal then, he said, raising a hand. Ready to kill the dwarf, Bakugo turned to face Mineta. He jerked his head in Kaminari's direction as he heard snickers. Kaminari guffawed and said, that makes two of us. Ojiro sighed and, with apparent hesitancy, raised his hand and said, I vote for Iida as representative and Yaoyorozu as vice representative. I don't know, Ojiro said thoughtfully, but I know Midoriya has a good head on his shoulders. If he believes Iida and Yaoyorozu are the best for the position, I guess he probably is right. Me too, cried the Hagakure, the floating garments. Aoyama declared, Iida and Yaoyorozu have my sparkling vote, hun hun hun. Tokiyami hummed dramatically, it seems the forces of darkness have made their choice, then I shall acquiesce. While Koji Koda wrote Iida Yaoyorozu on a large piece of cardboard, Shoji simply gave Midoriya the thumbs up. To Midoriya's surprise, almost every student in the class chose Yaoyorozu to be the vice representative and Iida to be the class representative. Bakugo blasted it, primarily criticizing Midoriya's role in the ultimate choice. Todoroki said he didn't care who the class representative was, but he stayed silent the entire time. So Iida and Yaoyorozu were at the front within a few minutes. Iida's voice was loud and intense as he declared, I humbly accept this position. I promise I shall live up to all of your expectations and that I shall not fail you. Sweat-soaked, Yaoyorozu simply uttered, what he said, I suppose. Aizawa went to stand behind his desk and muttered, that was too fast. He narrowed his eyes at Midoriya, who deferentially covered his face. You didn't give me any time to actually sleep, he said. So be it. Now, to the other issue, the sports festival will take place in 1 month. The unexpected news stunned the students, as was to be expected. Honda questioned in amazement, hold on, the sports festival. As in, the sports festival. Kaminari cried out, oh crap, I completely forgot about that. That's right, the sports festival, the opportunity of a lifetime to be seen and recognized by pro heroes across Japan and even around the world, Aizawa said with a dejected tone. Aizawa grinned at the increasingly anxious students and said, at least, that is what it is supposed to be. Let me be clear, to the world, the sports festival is entertainment. To you, it will be a test to determine who remains in the hero course. What? Exclaimed the class in horror. Anyone who fails to impress at least 10 hero agencies in Japan will be removed from the hero course and taken to general studies. Of course, if I believe that you did too poorly, I will have you expelled from UA entirely, said Aizawa. I know what you are all thinking. Just how hard could it be with over 2,000 agencies out there? Please, don't be naive. Most of you will need to pull something impressive just to attract a single pair of eyes, much less the official interest of an agency. Wide-eyed and slack-jawed, everyone gazed at him. The principal has informed me that you got the information books. Good, use them. UA has multiple facilities available for its students. You need to test your quirk. Book 1 of the battlegrounds. You want to improve your physical prowess. There are gyms. I suggest you work together. Spar. Practice and learn from the criticism given by your peers. Above all, go beyond, go plus ultra, Aizawa sighed. Through this and the following week I will have individual talks with each and every one of you in order to provide pointers regarding your fighting styles, quirks and training plan. Aizawa checked the hour languidly. Aizawa said, well, I guess that's it. He looked over at Midoriya. You will be the first I'll deal with. Search for me after class. He then turned to face Koji Koda, who was clearly pale. The girl shrank in her place, gulping, you'll speak to me after Midoriya, am I clear? And Jiro. We'll have a long interesting talk after Koda. 18 students were left in horror as Aizawa left the classroom without saying another word. They went crazy as soon as Aizawa left, as was to be expected. Hero agencies had to be impressed. How? All of them had attended the previous year's sports festival. In general, they were random games that frequently ended in one-on-one combat. It goes without saying that several students were beginning to lose their minds. Iida shouted, everyone. And the class fell silent. I understand how you all feel. However, we are all better than this. We all fought for our place here and we have all proven to at least deserve this position. If we work to improve ourselves, I am certain we will prevail. Easy for you to say. You are the brother of a pro hero. Agencies will pay attention to that. Mineta broke down. Look at me. What do I have to offer? Oh yeah, tough luck. Look at me. I'm invisible. How can I impress an agency, much less 10? They won't even see me. Hagakure yelled. Uraraka herself was not doing much better. The day before, during the battle trial, she hadn't even used her quirk. What if the situation had been the same at the sports festival? It wouldn't surprise her. Even worse, it would be nerve-wracking because so many people would be watching. Bakugo boasted with a sardonic laugh. Ha, that will show all of you who's the best, you extras. He was standing on his desk again, laughing gleefully. That will teach you all. Once I beat the shitty games, everyone will know that I will be the next #1 hero. Glowering at the explosive boy, Kirishima said, hey, what's your problem, man? Bakugo smirked and remarked, face it, stupid hair, your quirks don't compare to mine. Uraraka scowled. Bakugo was right. For someone like Bakugo, getting attention wouldn't be difficult. Even worse, he had demonstrated a certain level of combat proficiency in the battle trial and remarkable physical prowess during the quirk assessment test. Her shoulders dropped. What if she didn't succeed? Following everything, her parents. Hey, Uraraka, are you alright? Feeling conflicted, she turned to face Midoriya. On the one hand, she appreciated his encouragement. Uraraka, however, wished she had a peculiarity similar to Midoriya's. It attracted attention, but it lacked power. Yes, Uraraka lied when she said, it is just, you know, really stressing. She added as she looked around. To all of us I guess. Midoriya studied the class and scowled. Bakugo chuckled as Todoroki stayed silent. Shoji and Koji, for example, appeared concerned but were quiet about it. Others, such as Mineta and Hagakure, appeared frightened. Others, like Mina Ishido, made an effort to maintain their optimism. Although Asui appeared unfazed, he was currently unable to refrain from sternly delivering the facts to a traumatized Aoyama, who had unexpectedly lost his flamboyant demeanor. Uraraka let out a sigh. After all, there was a reason why Ua was the best. Those who succeeded in living up to the high standards most likely earned their diplomas. That made her grimace. Could she afford a hero program at another high school? Her chances of succeeding after graduation would undoubtedly be diminished, but it wouldn't matter if it helped her make ends meet at home, would it? Hey, Uraraka's gaze expanded. There were others besides her. His nine-tailed form was there, taking the place of human Midoriya. Ordinarily, Uraraka would have assumed that a simple boy would have received little attention. It was difficult not to listen, though, with those fox ears and that fierce face. His savage face had a commanding quality, or perhaps it was the way his tails enlarged and emphasized his size. Please, everyone, Midoriya said, her face gentle but resolute. You all have so much potential, even though I know you probably don't think so. Mineta, you claim no one will notice you, but didn't you break the record for the longest sideways jump? You did a fantastic job yesterday as well, and not even pro hero bouncer displayed moves like yours. Your peculiarity isn't particularly noticeable or ostentatious, Hagakure, but deeds speak louder than words. Pro hero Illumina and pro hero Shadowtail, for example, had transparency and shadow cloaking, respectively, but your quirk is even better. Do you believe that surpassing them is impossible? You made it to the most prestigious hero school of Japan. Heck, we survived Aizawa's quirk apprehension test already. We have an entire month to train, that is more than plenty, said Midoriya. True, some of you had been practicing since childhood, but did you have top-level training facilities like UA? Do you really believe we can't beat Aizawa's expectations? Well said, Midoriya. As pro-hero Smintos spoke, the fox boy in question tensed up and his face became hot. He walked calmly to the teacher's desk while Midoriya, who was flushed, appeared to want to be swallowed whole by the ground. Smintos sighed and shook his head, saying, I'm going to assume that Aizawa has already frightened you about the sports festival. Don't let the fear of failure consume you. Like your classmate correctly said, you can all beat Aizawa's expectations. Of course, as long as you train and work hard, that is. Now, let us go back to modern literature, shall we? After that, Midoriya was so ashamed that he was unable to look away from his notes or the blackboard. What had driven him to make such an absurd speech? Returning to his human form, he focused in his classes and was able to divert his attention from his own folly. Unfortunately, what was done, and his classmates wouldn't let it go unpunished, especially during recess. He detested it when he slipped into his nine-tailed form. Hey, Midoriya! Midoriya gazed at the clothes that floated. Mineta and other classmates were behind her. He stumbled. Why yes, do you need anything? Yeah, we were wondering about those pros you mentioned. How did you know about them? I've never heard of a pro-hero Illumina, said Hagakure. Midoriya laughed and said, yes, I guessed as much. She is a German pro-hero. I'm kind of a fanboy, you see. Midoriya ended up talking endlessly about different pro-heroes he knew during every break, including lunch. Even Tokiyami and Shoji, the last people Midoriya thought would seek his assistance, asked if there was anything they could use as the basis for their peculiarities. Naturally, Midoriya had more than enough material to discuss because of her recollection of over a dozen notebooks filled with information about pro-heroes and the hours she spent studying and learning from global heroes. Whether they were Taiwanese or Argentinian, Midoriya had a wide variety of heroes that he had researched and memorized. After all, Midoriya was aware that he had no rival in terms of quirk knowledge. Fortunately, Class 1A got to work in a timely manner. Everyone started looking for the training facilities as soon as the last bell rang, possibly motivated by a desire to succeed. If there was a booking system, they would at most check out because nobody had any clothing or training equipment. But Midoriya doubted they would lose the chance if they could begin practicing immediately. Regretfully, Uraraka and Iida agreed to share any information they learned later because Midoriya had a meeting with Aizawa. He was anxious because he thought his quirk would be involved. Midoriya pondered what they would discuss as he traveled to the teachers along with a nervous Jiro and Koda. Perhaps he ought to have updated the quirk registry information earlier. Sit, says Aizawa. Glancing around, Midoriya swallowed. They were seated on opposite couches in a side room. Where exactly were they? He looked around the room tentatively. The facilities at UA were undoubtedly superior to those at Aldera Middle School. Jiro and Koda waited patiently outside with Aizawa for their turn. Aizawa sighed wearily. Let me just say, you truly are a problem child. Weary, he leaned back. He had a mug of steaming coffee in one hand. The files on his lap were not missed by Midoriya. Tell me, Midoriya, why didn't you update your quirk registry? Midoriya looked shamefully at his lap and grimaced. Yes, he had undoubtedly made a mistake with that. I would have expelled you if you had been anyone else, Aizawa snarled, glaring at Midoriya. What you did, using unknown quirk facets, on your classmates, was foolish and risky. True, they were harmless, but we had no means to assess that. More importantly, the lack of information in your quirk registry severely underestimates the scope of your quirk. What if you had attained a violent form? What were we supposed to assume? Midoriya grew smaller as his shoulder dropped. He deserved it, and boy was he done for. As he opened the files on his lap, Aizawa muttered, however, given your circumstances, I've decided to let the matter go. Do not get me wrong, Midoriya. As soon as we are done here you will update your quirk registry, and if I ever hear that you concealed information about aspects of your quirk, I will expel you. Am I clear? Why yes, sir, was Midoriya's halting response. Glaring at the papers he was holding, Aizawa complained, now, let's get this over with. Tell me, problem child, why are you so reluctant to be yourself? Confused, Midoriya began to ask, what do you? Why do you hide in that form? Aizawa asked directly. Hide, stumbled Midoriya. He glanced down at himself after blinking at the man. That's what. Aizawa cut you off, saying, your true form has 9 tails. What? No, this is, Aizawa said. Tell me, Midoriya, do you know how my quirk works? He stopped and let out a sigh. The boy knows, of course, he told himself. Better question, did you realize I used it during the quirk apprehension test? Midoriya scowled before his eyes widened. What, you did? He asked. Oh, he looked down, startled. When Kei-Kachan, that's, but, he paused, then turned to face his teacher pitifully. Sir, I know why you would think this isn't my real F-form B, but, this is who I am, who I've always been. Aizawa pitied the youngster. It's not much, but it's more than Aizawa could handle. Aizawa was reluctant to bring up the subject, but since he was present, he said, Kachan. You mean Bakugo, why do you call him that? Midoriya froze and said, he has always been Kei-Kachan ever since I was. Despite his own suffering, Aizawa felt sympathy for the boy. When that terrible thing called sympathy emerged from its black hole, he detested it. As Aizawa put it, since before you suppressed your real form, that would explain why your real self looks ready to maul Bakugo. He arched an eyebrow. You do know he is a bully that is more worthy of juvenile prison than my class. Midoriya shook his head and muttered, that's not true. He really isn't that bad. With a dry chuckle, Aizawa asked, should I use my quirk to know what you really think about him? His hand patted the pile of papers on his lap and said, problem child, see these files here. I've been digging up your short life, with some help, and I do not like what I found. I might not have found concrete evidence, but I am not stupid. I know the role Bakugo played in your current mental state and your late quirk manifestation. The teacher's eyes made Midoriya wriggle. Although it was difficult, Aizawa really didn't want to squint at the boy. Recalling that he was meant to assist Midoriya, he inhaled deeply and gazed down at the files. Part of Aizawa wasn't sure he wanted to begin at all. Unfortunately, a hero had to face some unpleasant situations. He read the opening page. So from early childhood you were always in close proximity to Bakugo. Kindergarten, grade school, middle school and now high school. Your mothers, being close friends, almost made sure you saw a lot of each other. In fact, at some point, you were allegedly friends yourselves. That was until his quirk manifested and yours didn't. Naturally, you developed a clumsy nature. The way Aizawa said it and the accusatory look in those eyes bothered Midoriya. Under his teacher's eyes, the boy with the green hair writhed. Fortunately, Aizawa continued to read. Suddenly, Aizawa said, he came up with the nickname Deku, didn't he? Desperately, Midoriya exclaimed, it no yes, B but it was W when we were really little. A and it J just caught on. S so I was stuck W with that nickname. Aizawa was becoming more and more tempted to simply summon the nine-tailed Midoriya. Naturally, given Midoriya's current situation, he would never use his quirk on someone in that manner. When Aizawa said, you sure were, weren't you? She nearly spat. Enough to repress your own quirk. Midoriya flinched. Aizawa wanted to slap himself. He didn't need to get angry right now. Aizawa shook his head, took another breath, and took a sip of coffee to help him relax. With eyes on the file, Aizawa noted, so you were diagnosed quirkless and you thought you were so for almost a decade, until the sludge villain incident. After that, you were diagnosed by what doctors call mental repression. In short, you were so convinced that that is your real form that you were unable to take any others. It took a near-death experience for your true form to manifest. Midoriya was dreadfully quiet. Aizawa looked at the dejected child for a few moments. Little Aizawa had dug up the fact that Midoriya had, in fact, had a very difficult life. There was more that Midoriya deliberately concealed or, worse, that he was unaware of. But mental repression doesn't end there, does it? It is years and years of denial. To the point even in the face of your own quirk, you insist on lying to yourself about your true form. Aizawa took a deep breath. His temper was erupting once more. Whilst rare, it is a good thing we already know how to treat mental repression. Midoriya stayed silent and appeared dejected. I must admit, I am impressed. For someone who has endured mental repression, you've made it far, said Aizawa. He shared his discovery with the boy after reading the files once more. After the incident, you spent 1 month in quirk rehabilitation. Your school, though, recorded it as a recovery period from the villain attack. Had I not talked with your mother, I would have known you went to a quirk counselor and a psychiatrist afterwards. Why you spoke tea to my mom? Midoriya said, who was pale. Aizawa said, yes, it is the logical course of action, before returning to the subject. Even when facing an identity crisis, even when you had a big disadvantage in comparison to other examinees, even when you had never put any effort to be a pro-hero prior to the sludge villain incident, you somehow made it into UA. Leaning forward, he tried to control his rage. Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose and said, and yet, after everything, you still defend Bakugo, going as far as calling him that friendly nickname. It is disturbing, problem child. With his eyes turned away, Midoriya muttered, what do you want me to say? That catch Bakugo was mean to me. It happens and well, I did deserve some of it. I insisted on being a quirkless hero and so what? Sneered Aizawa, that justifies the mental damage he inflicted. Mental repression, from what I've just learned today, is insidious and takes the person to actually develop an extreme lack of self-worth. But he isn't that bad. Midoriya insisted. He does have good qualities and do you know why I haven't expelled Bakugo? It isn't because of his quirk, it isn't because of his oh-so-amazing scores, Aizawa was about to growl. It is because Principal Nezu, and I, understand a boy like that, if we pop his bubble of grandeur at this point, will become a villain. He would never, exclaimed Midoriya. Yes, he would, and Bakugo is so close to becoming one now, Aizawa said. Do you believe you are the only person he has harassed? Again, I don't have hard proof to identify him, but I know another UA student who has encountered Bakugo's destructive ways. I've dealt with people like him, I even had a classmate who was like that. They almost always turn into villains. Redirecting their mania against villains is the best we can do, but the suffering they endure is irreversible. Is Bakugo capable of becoming a great hero? I'll make sure of that, of course. He could even make it into the top 10. However, he will regrettably be a villain on the right side of the law at his best, Aizawa grunted. How? Why would you say that? With horror, Midoriya inquired. You troublesome kid, get used to it. I'm afraid that the new issues in this peculiar world cannot be solved by the same old solutions. To prevent death and mayhem, we must make awful concessions. Am I fond of it? Obviously not. I believe that a new dark age will unavoidably be ushered in by the horrible decay that our society has produced. However, that is a topic for another discussion. Simply, consider Bakugo and how he treated you. Aizawa sighed and shook his head, saying, the best I can do is set you in a path away from him, but I might not be able to punish him until he crosses the line he so surely treads. He really wanted the nine-tailed form there, and he even brought one of Hound Dog's anger management chewing toys just in case, but no, you can't use your quirk on your students without a good reason. It was time to change the topic, if only to keep Midoriya from crying. How did you prepare to take the test? Midoriya was clearly relieved that the topic had changed. The majority of my time was spent honing my tail control. I started running, going as far as neighboring districts to improve my stamina, Midoriya stated. At first, I used them for mundane tasks then I used them to move increasingly heavier objects. Aizawa noted that you concentrated solely on your nine-tailed form, which was a wise decision considering the short amount of time you had available. Your lack of control and combat inexperience, however, are still evident. What kind of training plan do you have for the sports festival? Will you devote all of your attention to your most combat-oriented form? Midoriya stumbled, before gathering himself. I plan to use weights to strengthen the rest of my body, improve my control on my tails, and practice fighting techniques, for my nine-tailed form, that is. How about the alternative forms? If I recall correctly, you acknowledged during the battle trial that your four-tail form, for instance, lacked training, inquired Aizawa, raising an eyebrow. I can't use it, Midoriya uttered. Are you unable to? Will it? Aizawa inquired. Sir, you witnessed me in that form. I will humiliate myself in front of everyone. Midoriya spluttered, and on live TV around the world. When I watched the battle trials video, did you notice what I saw? A future hero capable of incapacitating a person without causing harm. Midoriya is one of the four tails' special and practical abilities. What about the three tails? You know that, Aizawa said. That form was a very smart move on your part. According to Nezu, the blue flames have the ability to mend wounds, and you were able to do so after Bakugo left you hurt. It might even pique the interest of Recovery Girl. Midoriya muttered, It quickly depletes my stamina when I heal, even scratches. Aizawa said, because you haven't trained with that form. In fact, he said, eyeing the files once more and flipping through a few pages, you hardly ever use any of the other forms, even when your quirk counselor and psychologist suggested otherwise. Your mother has told me that because of the psychological nature of your quirk, you even have a special permit to change in public. Midoriya spluttered, why you can't suggest I go around in my other forms. I am recommending precisely that, if only to help you feel at ease in them. Your reluctance to fully utilize your quirk is your biggest obstacle moving forward. As Aizawa hummed, her gaze fixed on the files, your mother told me that if you don't use your own quirk, you run the serious risk of stunting it. It's possible that this will enable you to access additional forms. Midoriya appeared unconvinced, or at the very least, displeased. I won't make you do anything against your will. However, I think you should train with your other forms during this month of preparation. To make up for lost time, I advise you to spend time in them. Midoriya, you weren't meant to stay in that shape indefinitely. Midoriya whispered, I can't, sir. I lose myself when I am not, me. How I acted when you saw me as the Four Tails. Aizawa looked up from the papers and said, I don't care how or when you unlocked your current forms, Midoriya. That is a result of mental repression, or that's what your psychologist believed. I only ask that you consider them. If you have to, train with them in private. Meanwhile, I have one suggestion. He grabbed a bag from behind his couch and tossed it to Midoriya, who caught it and gazed at it in confusion. Aizawa said, practice. Midoriya turned to his smiling teacher after glancing at the bag in confusion. I have discussed this with your mother, and she has given her consent, he said. Once more, this is for your own benefit, I won't force you. Then Midoriya looked down at the package and looked at Aizawa incredulously, saying, but this is, before realizing what it meant. No, I am not, he said as he stood up. Again, Aizawa said with a smile and a conciliatory gesture, it's up to you. It is up to you, but we encourage you to do so. Nezu has given his approval after we spoke about it. The other educators didn't see any problems. Midoriya frowned. Aizawa continued, turning more pages. With that out of the way, Midoriya scowled at the piles of piles, wondering how much his teacher had unearthed from his past. Let's discuss how we can further overcome this ongoing repression of yours. I don't think you'll like the idea I have. What? Midoriya inquired, as he had additional suggestions. With midnight, Midoriya's eyes widened. No, I don't mean it so you can learn from her, although you should. Since Bakugo has to have your last costume redone, I want you to redesign your costume. She can assist you in creating a costume that is appropriate for you and not an All Might fanboy because she is a costume designer. Did Mom tell you about my costume, or was I that obvious? Midoriya grimaced and muttered. Both. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Midoriya, you need to stop being a fanboy and start taking care of yourself. Aizawa acknowledged, it's time for you to discover who you are and who you want to be, and that, problem child, starts with the fundamentals like your costume. Please, consider it, okay. Problem child, I don't want you to waste your potential. I hope that one day you will recognize that you are a worthy hero. Perhaps it was Aizawa's personality, or perhaps it was the sour taste in his mouth from their conversation about Bakugo, but for a brief moment, Midoriya wondered why he didn't feel happy that someone had actually told him that he could make a great hero. It was one of those things he had yearned for all his life. Midoriya frowned as he looked down at the offered package, but he knew that Aizawa was right, and that even though he detested the idea, he would never in 1,000 years agree to this ridiculous proposal. He had to accept and embrace his other forms, which meant spending time as them. The fact that he didn't like it didn't matter, he could always set aside a few hours after school. The next morning, Midoriya muttered to herself, I can't believe I am going along with this. When the train finally started moving, Midoriya made sure to glance down. Given his current form, he was a little nervous right now. The rabbit girl talking to him that morning was the last thing he wanted. With rabbit girl added to the mix, he had had enough of his mother deceiving him into carrying out Aizawa's foolish scheme. Just consider this training, Midoriya repeated to herself. He clenched his fists and frowned. Why did I have to have this peculiarity? Excuse me, a voice that was completely unwanted called. Midoriya raised her head and frowned once more. She will arrive if you speak of the devil. But rather than feeling embarrassed or angry, A very playful part of him laughed inside, and Midoriya chose to comply for once. Do you happen to have a brother? The startled rabbit girl inquired. Using the available seats before the next station, she took a seat next to a three-tailed Midoriya. You know, a boy, 9 tails. Oh, Midoriya remarked slyly, that would be my brother Izuku. I couldn't help but smile. I am Izumi Midoriya. The rabbit girl sighed, huh. For a moment there I thought Fox Boy had gone all transsexual or something. I'm Rumi Usugiyama, by the way. You better remember that name. She grinned at Izuku with pride. I'll make it to the top 10 pro heroes. Nice to meet you, Usugiyama, and I sure don't doubt it, Izuku replied. He was making a concerted effort not to chuckle at poor rabbit girl. She was in for a huge surprise. Boy, I saw you during the sports festival last year. You were pretty amazing. Ha, of course I am. Rabbit girl said, in a proud swell of the chest. But she instantly looked perplexed as she turned to face Izuku, asking, say, why haven't I seen you before? And what happened to Fox Boy? Actually, Izuku is running late. And you will catch me dead before you see me with him, Izuku remarked, referring to the idiots who slept in. Twins, ha, ha, I understand your pain, said Rumi, smiling knowingly. Yes, you have siblings, then. Yeah, moaned Rumi, I'm the oldest of 8 of them. 8, sorry, I didn't mean to sound so surprised, Izuku inquired. Well, I did get my quirk from somewhere, you know, and you know how rabbits can be, Rumi laughed sheepishly. Now, imagine if both your parents have the quirk rabbit. Izuku's eyes grew wide. How likely is it? Did he ask? Rumi laughed and said, well, it is actually a long but funny story. The main idea is that, despite having the same name, both of their quirks are distinct from one another. Despite having the ability to change into a rabbit, my mother exhibits a lot of rabbit-like behaviors when she is human. But my dad has a mutant type. You see, I'm like him. They sort of clicked when they first met, and now I'm here. It's a long story, I assure you. Izuku, the zero-tailed persona, of course laughed impishly, but there was a part of him that seemed completely surprised that he was speaking to a reasonably attractive girl. What were the chances? Izuku and I don't really inherit our peculiarities from our parents, you know. Izuku revealed, we actually have a really strange mutation that comes from unrelated grandparents. Really? Rumi grinned and said, that sounds awesome. Are you in the hero course like your brother? You certainly don't look like your brother, and I don't mean to come across as judgmental. Unfortunately, I'm enrolled in general studies. About my brother, what was that? Perhaps enjoying this too much, Midoriya thought, I've been told I look a lot like him, could actually pass as Izuku if I wanted. With a wistful gaze at the ceiling, Rumi explained, well, he had this wimpy loser side but then when he was all fox-like he had this mean killing machine aura going for him. Now that is someone I really wanna fight. Midoriya did not like that cunning grin on Rabbit Girl's face. Do you think he would agree to a spar? Rabbit Girl was the epitome of, born for battle, and Midoriya would much rather live, he thought, recalling the sports festival. If you want, I can ask. Let's say you are enrolled in the hero course. Rumi went on and on about how amazing she was and how she couldn't wait to kick butt at the sports festival, but Izuku couldn't understand how or why he had made friends with the Rabbit Girl. Maybe it was a girl thing he didn't understand, or maybe it was Three Tails' gregarious nature. Of course, Midoriya already knew a lot about the hero course, but Rabbit Girl did teach him a few things, like how rescue training usually happened in a specialized facility under Pro Hero 13 and that Rabbit Girl would much rather beat someone up than do rescue training. Who would have thought that? By the time they reached their last station, they had begun discussing a variety of heroes, including Death Arms and Hawks. Naturally, Rabbit Girl always had one thing in mind when discussing heroes: fighting. Midoriya sensed that she simply enjoyed fighting. Rumi continued to talk without raising any suspicions, and by the time they were getting close to the school, Rumi had disclosed something significant about herself, which made Midoriya laugh more and more. You can label me a nerd if you like, but I simply adore watching heroes battle. Rumi boasted, I have all of the fights you can imagine on tape in my house. Really? I prefer taking notes about heroes, Izuku said, spluttering in amazement as her heart skipped a beat. Had she discovered a kindred spirit? Well, you're a bigger nerd than I am. Izuku was nudged by Rumi's laughter. The physical contact caused Izuku's cheeks to flush. Three Tails had always been reticent to make physical contact. As they passed through the gate, Rumi looked back and remarked, "Well, I guess your brother will be late." Izuku was losing her composure and was on the verge of laughing, but she had to wait until they entered the actual building, and once they were inside, she was unable to control herself. Izuku said in a cracking voice, "You shouldn't worry about him being late." She turned to Rabbit Girl and pulled out her phone, grinning. "By the way, Usagiyama." "Yes," Rumi pondered. "Poof. My name is Izuku Midoriya." Izuku, the nine-tailed, chuckled. The best part was that Izuku now had pictures for posterity. Before Usagiyama could react, Izuku poofed back to her three-tailed form and ran as fast as she could towards her classroom. By the time Izuku heard the Rabbit Girl's irate yells, she had already escaped. The Rabbit Girl's shocked face was priceless. It was that expression of dawning realization that was completely hilarious. Izuku laughed so much that she was having breathing problems when she arrived at the door of Class 1A. What in the world got into me? I can't just do that to people. But it had been fun to play along. Izuku thought. I never thought using other forms could be so much fun. She shook her head and slapped herself quickly. But now that she had reached the door of her classroom, all laughter had subsided in Izuku. Clad in a form-fitting female uniform, a gift from Aizawa the day before, she stood there rooted in place by apprehension, wondering how her classmates would respond. She frowned at that. Izuku looked down at her uniform and thought to herself, now is not the time to be a pansy. You are doing this to get better, so no backing out of this. Well, it's not like I can actually change my mind now, is it? One thing to do, then, jump into the fray, Izuku. Thank God Izuku always felt so bold with the three-tailed form, or else she would have been a mess already. She jumped, slammed the door open, and marched confidently towards her seat, grinning broadly. Fortunately, she did not miss the shocked and perplexed looks from her peers, and they did not approach her until he had sat down. Well, I don't mind at all, but why? Uraraka pondered as she sat there. Deku, why are you the girl with the flat chest? Izuku mumbled in her mind. Suddenly uneasy in her current shape, I am not flat-chested. I knew I shouldn't have agreed to. No. You aren't a quitter, Izuku. You can do this. What, have you said anything? Izuku asked, in a relaxed manner. You tranny, indeed. What on earth is that dumb girl's appearance? Bakugo yelled. While the other students stared at the feisty teenager, Izuku experienced a horrible knot in her stomach. Izuku told himself, come on, you are a fox, not a chicken. What, cute face, did you hear something? Izuku asked Uraraka nonchalantly. Bakugo went apoplectic, and Uraraka and others laughed. Bakugo snarled, why you stupid Deku? Is there a lot of hot air in here, or is it just me? Izuku smirked at Bakugo, who gritted his teeth in return, and huffed, fanning herself with a clawed hand. That girl from the battle trial is you. Ashido Mina loomed over Izuku, utterly thrilled. Does this look of yours have a different name? Nah, that would be too much of a bother, she said. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Just, you know, a super awesome fox girl for today. Wait, so you don't transform into someone else then? You only adopt various forms. Intrigued, Kyoka pondered, it must feel strange, doesn't it? Midoriya grunted, smiling and folding her arms on her back to show that she was comfortable in her own skin. Until then, I'm going to just be myself, she said. Only when I go back to being zero-tailed. I take it that you are currently a woman. What? Asked Yaoyorozu. Yes. Izuku scoffing at something she remembered, she said, I am a full girl now, just like when I am zero-tails, I am absolutely quirkless, extra toe joint and everything. In fact, back when I was a child, I was diagnosed as quirkless. I was unaware of my peculiarity until much later. Kirishima, who was standing beside Mina, grunted, damn, that sucks. Really? However, did they not conduct a study on the quirk factor? Yaoyorozu was curious. Why would they? I had the extra toe joint and showed no symptoms of a quirk. In fact, I had no idea I was a super cool demon fox until rather recently, give or take a year, Izuku said dismissively, adding that the doctor only instructed us to come back if anything changed with me. Everyone was surprised by that, even Bakugo, who was listening. Wait. You're claiming that you joined UA after revealing your quirk later than the rest of us. Kirishima exclaimed, that's really manly. Everyone believed you had no peculiarities until that point. Mina's eyes widened as she realized, oh, that must have been awful. So that would explain Bakugo's penchant for insults towards Midoriya that include synonyms to useless or weak, or why he has addressed our fellow classmate as quirkless, Iida said. And here I thought you had learned from the first day. As the class hurried to their seats, they all thought, **T. They waited anxiously while Aizawa strolled idly over to the teacher's desk and took a long, intimidating minute to examine each and every one of you. Aizawa smirked and said, "I see your mother got through you, problem child." His gaze shifted to Jiro and then to Kota, making them both perspire. "I hope the other two students I spoke to took our discussion to heart as well," he said. He turned to the others. "Is there anyone who finds Midoriya's various forms problematic? Because I fear that as part of his training, you will be seeing them all over the course of the next few days." "Indeed, I made that suggestion," complained Aizawa. With hesitation, Midoriya explained, "For the time being, I will switch between the 9 tails and the 3 tails." Aizawa sighed and shook his head, saying, "It's a start." The teacher looked at the owner and raised a hand. "Yaoyorozu. I wanted to know if he, she, or Midoriya would use the restrooms for women, such as the girls' restrooms." "I would be lying if I said I am not uncomfortable with the thought," Yaoyorozu asked. "No offense, Midoriya," she confessed nervously, casting an apologetic glance in Midoriya's direction. "Yeah, no kidding," Midoriya said with a laugh, "it must be awkward because I can change into a boy." "Don't worry, Yaomomo, I'll most likely die of embarrassment once I return to being tailless. You must realize that Midoriya belongs to a special category, or more accurately, the group of people who have sex-modifying quirks. But I don't fully understand that discussion. When Midoriya assumes female forms, it is best to treat her as a girl, and when he assumes male forms, as a boy. Simply address him as a boy if even that is too difficult for you. After all, that's his main personality," Aizawa clarified. Kaminari complained, "This is going to be so confusing." "Ah." Kyoka sneered, jabbing the lightning boy with her earphones, "Only if you are an idiot." "I don't mind turning into other forms if that makes the Gauls uncomfortable," said Midoriya. Yaoyorozu muttered, blushing with guilt, It isn't a problem, Midoriya. It will be strange at first, but I'm sure we'll get used to it. In addition, you may find this slightly more difficult than we do." "Hey, I understand. Don't be too hard on yourself," Midoriya complained. "Just don't go calling me tranny or anything." Midoriya did not miss the way Aizawa's eyes lingered on a smirking Bakugo, because of childish behavior, as he took a moment to give his students a warning glare. "While I do not care what you call each other, I rather not expel anyone. Yaoyorozu, Todoroki, and Bakugo, I'll be talking to you 3 after class today." Aizawa interrupted, capturing his students' frightened and undivided attention. While Todoroki hummed and Yaoyorozu gulped and wrung her hands nervously, Bakugo appeared ready to yell something but displayed remarkable restraint by huffing and nodding curtly at their teacher. This marked the start of a new day at UA. It would have been a lie to say that Class 1A had become accustomed to Midoriya's female form. The girls were unsure of how to treat her, and the boys felt uncomfortable around her. However, this Midoriya had an oddly gregarious personality that made her easy to talk to. Some, like Mina Ishido, found it exciting to treat Midoriya as a girl, while others, like Yaoyorozu, remained uneasy. Uraraka befriended Midoriya's 3-tailed personality, but she blushed whenever she was called cute face, though she didn't seem to mind. The rest of the day passed without incident. They had heroics class again, but this time, instead of All Might, they had their homeroom teacher Aizawa. Midoriya and the others felt that this was a last-minute change, and they didn't have much time for plots and such. Heroics with Aizawa was stressful, and they had to be on their toes all the time. At least it became easier after they got used to Aizawa's intense glares and no-nonsense demeanor. The training they received in heroics class was also unexpected. Rather than engaging in combat or anything else that would have been considered heroic, they began practicing their infiltration skills, which essentially involved navigating a maze by themselves while dodging cameras, dummies that were meant to be villains, and traps. Aizawa was not the only surprise they encountered. It was frightening to see Bakugo so silent and deadly calm for so long. After all, it was difficult to believe Bakugo could be a normal human being when he wanted to. Midoriya, dressed in gym clothes rather than her tattered costume, had breezed through the exercise as the 2 tails. Some people, like a certain invisible girl, excelled at it, while others, like Bakugo and Todoroki, absolutely hated it, but they did not perform poorly or fail. If it weren't for Bakugo, Midoriya could actually say he was becoming used to being a girl. Bakugo discovered a variety of ways to irritate Midoriya whenever no one was around, from calling her flat-chested to referring to her as a trap. To make matters worse, it caused the disassociation with her form that Midoriya found difficult to deal with. Of course, Midoriya was able to irritate Bakugo by largely ignoring the explosive boy, but it didn't help. And so another day came to an end. Midoriya sighed, grateful that her long ordeal was coming to an end and that she would be able to transform into her true form, as agreed upon with her mother. However, just as everyone was about to depart, they were all taken by surprise when they arrived at the classroom door and saw the school nurse, also known as Recovery Girl. She was small, gray-haired, and appeared to be looking for someone. "Well, are you trying to find someone?" Midoriya asked clumsily. "Come, you'll be training with me today," the Recovery Girl hummed. "Aha, there you are, young lass. Now what am I going to do?" Looking at his equally perplexed classmates, Midoriya spluttered. "After learning about this form's capabilities from Principal Nezu, I can't wait to witness them in action." "Come on," said Recovery Girl in a matter-of-fact manner. A cane fell on Midoriya's head as she stammered, But I have to train with my nine-tail, ouch." Now, dear, we can do this the easy way or the hard way," warned the recovery child. "And yes, I've got your mother's permission." With a frown, Midoriya looked at the nurse as if she was really thinking about it, and then she turned and jumped away, nearly reaching the closest window before the bandages wrapped around her legs and pulled her back, causing her to fall forward onto her face before snapping her head around in a desperate attempt to find a way out. "The hard way it is," sighed the recovery girl. 10 seconds later, to the horror of the classroom, they witnessed a humming recovery girl drag Midoriya out to the corridor while the fox girl screamed for freedom and left claw marks on the floor in an effort to break free. The old woman huffed and pulled the girl toward her, demonstrating her strength. "If you thought I'll just allow you to waste your potential, then I'm glad to say you were sorely mistaken," she said. "Well, is this lawful?" A startled Iida was asked by a worried Uraraka. Recovery girl turned to the students before anyone could reply, and instead of being the ferocious healing hero who happened to drag Midoriya, she abruptly gave the rest of Class 1A a grandmotherly aura as she spoke. "And trust me, this is for his own good," the recovery girl said with a smile as she handed out candies to the classmates who were watching. "Have some gummies, dears." The school nurse then took Midoriya away, leaving Class 1A staring in utter horror and confusion, holding colorful gummies in their hands, most of whom, to be honest, were unsure of how to react to what they had just seen. As Uraraka chewed on the candy, she remarked, "Maybe we should have helped him. These gummies aren't half bad." Iida looked at his hands and tasted one of the gummies, saying, "Possibly, but I do think training with Recovery Girl is both an honor and a boon for Midoriya." "They truly are delicious," he said. A sullen three-tailed Midoriya grunted, looking down at herself. You could have just asked. "And why am I tied like this?" Although Recovery Girl's quirk was likely more than enough for most injuries, the infirmary was a surprisingly small room with enough room for 3 beds. Midoriya had expected more equipment than a counter by his side, a few monitors, and a tall bookshelf with books and files for a school where teenagers were allowed to use their quirks. Speaking of which, Recovery Girl pointed her syringe-shaped cane at the girl and huffed, "Oh, I know you reckless types. You were all about fighting and smashing and all that nonsense." She paced in front of the girl who was bound, shaking her head, saying, "That's all you want, the glory or the thrill of the fight." Midoriya deadpanned, "That still doesn't answer why I am tied." "Why, isn't that clear?" "Because I heard you are being stubborn regarding your quirk, particularly that you have trouble adjusting to your forms," the elderly woman said, laughing and jumping onto a rotating chair of her own, sitting across from her prisoner. "Oh, sweetheart, I wasn't born yesterday. I am aware that you would much rather be practicing your girl form somewhere else than here." It was suggested by both that and Aizawa. "Figures," Midoriya muttered to herself, but she couldn't help but feel ashamed, so she turned away, her ears and tails falling. "There is nothing to feel guilty about right now. It must be difficult to reverse years and years of mental repression, based on what I understand. However," the school nurse said quietly, "I'll be damned if I let you waste that extraordinary ability of yours." This was a rare chance to get better, even to follow Aizawa's advice, but the 3-tailed form was the last one he intended to train with. The 4 tails didn't count, so Midoriya felt bad about it. Why was she acting like such a baby about it all? "I recognize that face, huh?" Waving her cane, Recovery Girl muttered, "You'd rather be that 9 tails boy with anger management issues." Ma'am, I'm already behind everyone else at the sports festival, which is in a month. In particular, she added in her mind, I appreciate what you are trying to do, but I need to focus on the forms that will help me win, Midoriya said. You've turned into a hero in order to triumph. Recovery Girl hummed as she asked. What? Obviously not. I just don't want to lose or be expelled, sighed Three Tails Midoriya. Is that correct? Tell me, sweetheart, what made you a hero? It can't be anything simple, can it? She asked with genuine curiosity. Nobody who has experienced what you have can pull himself together in a matter of months for the sake of fame, in my opinion. Midoriya closed her eyes and muttered, embarrassed, well, it isn't anything grand or amazing, actually. Ever since I was a child, before I was even 4 years old, I really wanted to be a hero. Have you watched All Might's debut? There was this video. How did he save so many lives on his own and impress the world? How did his smile startle everyone? That's how I wanted to be, inspiring. Recovery Girl sneered, oh dear, please, it can't be just that. However, it is, Midoriya said, when you didn't know you had a quirk, I can see why you might have held onto that dream like a lifeline, but what happened after that? When you realized your power would likely lead you in a different direction, why did you insist on being a hero? Recovery Girl hummed in a defiant manner. Startled by her own admission, Midoriya said, I don't know. Just something to think about. I think it will be beneficial if you can identify the type of hero you want to be and keep that in mind while training for the sports festival, Recovery Girl said, adding, I don't think All Might isn't your main drive. The old woman had a point, Midoriya thought, frowning as she considered what she had just said. A lot had happened since she had last seen that video. The infirmary's door slammed open, interrupting their conversation, startling the Tide Fox girl. Recovery Girl frowned, only to shake her head when she saw who had entered the facility. Are you in here, Recovery Girl? A very familiar girl stood there, wincing in pain and holding a foot in midair, and Midoriya, startled, blinked and snapped her head towards the door. Girl Rabbit, dumbfounded, Midoriya asked, Fox Girl, or Fox Boy, is it now? Rumi Usagiyama, who frowned at the restrained Midoriya, responded, her scarlet eyes wide with her own confusion. Do I want to know what's going on here? Usagiyama, what did you do this time? Oh dear, who did you pick a fight with this time? Muttered a frustrated Recovery Girl, but the reason became clear when she saw how Usagiyama held one of her rabbit feet. The rabbit girl was led by Recovery to a bed and examined the wound, which appeared to be quite painful. I didn't start an argument. This time, anyway, Rabbit Girl muttered, adding under her breath. Aha! The Recovery Girl nodded incredulously and scoffed sarcastically. I'm not kidding. A huge hammer fell on my foot as this locker suddenly opened while I was going about my business. I said Rabbit Girl. Recovery Girl pinched the bridge of her nose, obviously not believing that story, and neither did Midoriya. Really, a hammer just fell on her foot. It was so absurd, Midoriya laughed. Oh, that's the reality. Rabbit Girl cried out. Yeah, right, Midoriya sighed. Rabbit Girl muttered, bah, think whatever you want. So, can you just use your quirk and be done with it? You know, it's painful. Recovery Girl looked at the rabbit foot for a moment, and then Midoriya saw that the old woman was doing something, because her obvious irritation vanished and was replaced by a grandmotherly demeanor. Why don't you treat poor Usagiyama here, Midoriya? Rabbit Girl must have sensed something was wrong, because she gave the two of them a suspicious look, and Midoriya herself had to suppress a smile. Wait, Fox B Girl, you can recover now? Rabbit Girl asked, squinting at the girl with the green hair. Midoriya cheerfully replied, yep, it is part of my quirk. This was going to be a lot of fun. Rabbit Girl just uttered the word, huh, while gazing curiously at Midoriya. Recovery Girl took off Midoriya's bandages, but Rabbit Girl stayed seated and fidgeted, even though it seemed like she would rather be somewhere else and didn't trust Midoriya. Will you please hurry? Rabbit Girl said impatiently, I have a butt to keep, that is, training to do. Midoriya raised her hands at the extended rabbit foot and said, just show me your foot. This might burn a bit. Are you burned? Rabbit Girl asked, baffled. That was before she saw the blue flames. Arg, what the devil? Watching Rabbit Girl panic, which was understandable given the strange blue fire dancing on her injured foot, an amused Recovery Girl and an amused Midoriya tried slapping her foot with her hands and rolling on the ground. Oh no, set a fire. Fi huh. Usagiyama screamed before looking at her healed foot in shock. Midoriya rolled on the ground and started laughing. What a messed up method of healing. Rabbit Girl cried out in rage, but her rage soon gave way to laughter, and she smiled at Midoriya, confessing, I like it. I just can't help myself at times, Midoriya said with a giggle as she stood up. Rabbit Girl examined her foot and said, it's no problem. Oh, no problem, Fox Girl. It's like brand new. I suppose I know who to contact in case I need a fast fix. What was that? Recovery Girl grunted. I expressed my gratitude for everything. Rabbit Girl winked at Midoriya and said, see you around, Fox Girl. She laughed sheepishly and said, I'll be on my way. Recovery harumphed, then turned to smile at Midoriya as Rabbit Girl leapt out of the infirmary before anyone could say anything. Wasn't that not too bad? Recovery Girl said. That was fun, actually. Maybe I wouldn't mind training with you, Midoriya smiled, blinking before staggered back, lightheaded. Or maybe not, she said. Are you already worn out? With a worried frown, Recovery Girl hummed. With dark bags under her eyes, Midoriya complained, yeah, we had heroics today so I might have been a bit spent. Recovery Girl sulked. That means only one thing. We need to boost your energy levels. We must develop a healthy diet, a practice schedule, and a physical exercise program. If you share the same energy pool, this may also benefit your other forms. It sounded perfect for the sports festival, but for now Midoriya needed something else, and now there was something she could support. In a matter of seconds, Midoriya was snoring. That sounds wonderful, slurred the drowsy Fox Girl. You wouldn't mind if I took a, and before she could finish, she fell onto the empty bed. With a laugh and a shake of her head, Recovery Girl tucked the girl into bed and shut the curtains for privacy. My dear, don't worry, she said softly, we'll make a fine hero out of you, and then she turned to face the door. Maybe I should check on that battle-lusting rabbit, she said, frowning suddenly. The following day, nine-tailed Midoriya arrived at the station prepared to die. Leaving the apartment, let alone getting out of bed, had been nearly impossible. Perhaps he would adopt Aizawa's strategy and bring a sleeping bag. Unfortunately, he had to train with the nine-tailed form if he wanted to defeat Bakugo and win the sports festival. He spent too much time with Recovery Girl, which is unfortunate. That wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but in a contest of sheer strength, the three tails weren't going to help him. Izuku pondered, it's amazing that I was able to remain the three tails yesterday without experiencing a panic attack. Midoriya had to admit, if he was being truthful with himself, that Aizawa had a valid point, and that perhaps his mother, psychiatrist, Quirk doctor, and Quirk counselor were all right. Midoriya waited for the train while yawning and putting his clawed hands in his pockets. All he had to do was lie, think clearly, and restrain himself. He was capable, he was certain he could. He would eventually be able to master all of his absurd forms and steer clear of their peculiar dispositions. Who could have known? In the process, he might turn into a great hero. Regretfully, he had forgotten about something, or rather, someone, at the moment. Well, if it isn't Fox Tranny. Rabbit Girl returned Midoriya's glare with a smirk. Ironically, though, Midoriya's irritation didn't last long. In fact, he was grinning back at her. It was a strange thing, no doubt. He had believed that the Nine Tails had serious temper problems, after all. He sighed in amusement, how original, and here I thought you liked me. Rabbit Girl thought, smiling broadly, so the human-looking you is nerdy and wimpy and this form is aloof and hip. Midoriya grunted, I am neither of those things. He shook his head and sighed. A smile threatened to spread across his face as he said, I apologize for yesterday morning. I just couldn't help pulling that joke on you. Rabbit Girl laughed and said, I'll admit, you really got me. So this is your quirk, you can change into different people with different quirks. Midoriya pondered the number of times he would need to justify his peculiarity. He quickly replied, no, I change forms. No matter what form I take, I remain Izuku Midoriya. He paused, looking for the right word, but each form has its own unique drives and desires. Really? What about this form? You act really different from the girl from yesterday or the whiny loser from the day before, said the Rabbit Girl. Izuku gave her a menacing squint. He growled, don't call me a whiny loser. Rabbit Girl backed off, surprised at how fierce Midoriya's words were. Izuku's eyes grew wide as he realized what he had done. Sorry, I didn't. With a broad smile, Rabbit Girl exclaimed, wow, I really like this form of yours. I liked you as Fox Girl, but I think this form is way better. Puzzled, Midoriya blinked at her. Here, he anticipated that she would become enraged or continue to be wary of the irate fox boy. However, it was Rumi Usagiyama. She tilted her head and scowled. So your forms, do they have different likes? That must be weird. Like, does each form have a different favorite dish? Izuku leaned back and began to laugh after his eyes briefly nearly burst out of their sockets. Oi, what's so funny? Huffed the rabbit girl impatiently. Sorry, it is just that, you are the first person to ask me that, Izuku laughed. No, as far as I know, I like Katsudon no matter the form, just like I like All Might. Rabbit girl sneered, who doesn't like All Might? Villains aside, of course. When the train finally pulled in, the two of them entered. Though she didn't mind, Midoriya was a little taken aback when he decided to sit next to Rabbit Girl. She actually smirked at him with a haughty smile. As the train stumbled ahead, Midoriya informed her, there are a few differences, though. When I have zero tails I become an absolute fanboy about All Might. Rabbit Girl asked, and what about now? What's your opinion about our newest teacher? I respect him, and of course maintain a degree of admiration, but I understand that perhaps he isn't the best role model out there, said Midoriya. Yeah, he is a bit. I don't know, oblivious. Still though, does having extra tails make you more sophisticated or what? Rabbit Girl laughed out loud. You sound like you are disappointed with the man. Midoriya immediately remembered Aizawa and Recovery Girl. Both of them had essentially told him what his mother had told him. Well, I admire him, alright. But I can't be like him. I don't think anyone can. He possesses an extraordinary quirk, Midoriya exhaled. I see that now, in this form, that maybe I've allowed my admiration for All Might cloud my actions. You wouldn't be the first. Do you know how many enroll in UA just to be like All Might? I for one say screw it. If you want to be the best, beat the shit out of anything that gets in your way, said Rabbit Girl. You do you to the best you can do. That made Midoriya and a laughing Rabbit Girl snicker. Midoriya laughed and said, that's the thing, my quirk isn't like yours. Oh, I can fight alright, but my true strength comes from my forms and cunning. The statement, I just can't be the same type of hero as All Might, was added with a sad smile. Rabbit Girl shrugged and sneered, so what? Just be yourself. Whatever self you want to be at the time, that is. We don't have to all be the next symbol of peace, you know. As they reached the first station, more people began to arrive. Fortunately, there were enough seats for everyone this time. Rabbit Girl and Midoriya both got the same notification as the train lurched forward for the second time. They looked at one another in confusion, then at their phones. Both teens shouted with equal fervor, Kamui Woods is fighting right now. They blinked and snapped their heads at one another before bursting into giggles. When Midoriya said, you have the Hero Watcher app, she laughed. Rabbit Girl remarked, oi, I told you, I love seeing fights. She glanced at the station from which they had left. Pity we wouldn't make it back to UA in time. Yeah, I remember when I made it 30 minutes late because of Mount Lady's debut, Midoriya laughed. The memory made him force a smile. Boy was that disappointing. A sour Rabbit Girl sneered, you saw that crap too. I was there, you know. Most ridiculous shit I've seen. Yes, Midoriya recalled, she entered right before Kamui Woods' final maneuver. And don't get me started on those poses she did afterward. That is because Kamui was a moron and didn't finish the fight fast enough. That's a rookie mistake, Rabbit Girl responded. Although, that's what heroes live for, right? She sneered angrily. Most crave attention. Pathetic. If they spent half their time doing real hero work, helping their local communities, instead of spouting stupid monologues or doing ridiculous poses, they wouldn't have to worry about making it to the top. Midoriya nodded, just as irritated. I agree. He grimaced, his mind flashing to Bakugo. Many heroes might have fine moves but they have become so self-absorbed, he said. He came to the realization, not that I have been any better. I haven't really thought about being better than them, to actually be the sort of hero that bothers more about the people near him than the impression he leaves on people. Maybe. Smack. A fist struck the top of Midoriya's head gently, causing him to recoil. Midoriya scratched his head and growled, ouch. What was that for? Rabbit Girl grinned and said, you were acting whiny for a while there, Fox Boy. If we want to be better heroes, we act. We don't do whiny contemplative nonsense. Am I clear, Fox Boy? Midoriya scowled as she considered what she had said. Although he concurred with the prevailing opinion, he would have much rather not been given a beating for it. But then, perhaps that was what he occasionally needed. He said, I have to think about it. Rabbit Girl pondered and nudged Fox Boy, saying, just don't think too much. There's a life to live, you know. Midoriya let out a sigh. Her point was valid, wasn't it? He looked at her. She busied herself with the cell phone and yawned. Midoriya briefly considered ignoring the rabbit girl and going about his own business. However, he found the prospect of becoming friends with someone like her appealing. But that meant trying to strike up a conversation with a pretty girl, which would take some courage. You've talked to Uraraka, Midoriya, so hurry up. Midoriya thought, just come up with something to say. He brushed the idea aside. How could I possibly talk to her about anything? All I am is a hero nerd. Nevertheless, as he was thinking that, a thought suddenly occurred to him. Midoriya blurted out, so, did you see yesterday's fight between Golden Eagle and White Jaws? You fool, why should she be interested in American heroes? Midoriya scolded himself in his mind. It had to be a fight that took place abroad. Out of everything you had to choose. Rabbit Girl asked abruptly, smiling and wide-eyed, you saw that too? What? That worked, oh Fox God. I am a genius. Midoriya chuckled to herself. It was pretty intense, although Golden Eagle is lucky White Jaws is such a brute. A bit more finesse and that pompous hero would have gotten his ass handed to him, said Rabbit Girl. White Jaws could have been smarter when fighting someone with air superiority, said Midoriya. Rabbit Girl gave in. That too, hey, I didn't think you were into international hero fights. Now, Midoriya thought, that's my line. Well, of course I am. I have notebooks to fill with hero analysis, after all, joked Midoriya. What makes me such a nerd? Is that the best idea I could think of? Midoriya groaned in her mind. Rabbit Girl laughed and nudged a relieved Midoriya, saying, you are such a nerd, Fox Boy. She smiled enthusiastically and raised a challenging eyebrow. What about European heroes? Do you also follow them? Midoriya laughed to herself. Oh ho, maybe this talking to girls thing is easier than I had first thought. Talking heroes was the way the rest of the journey proceeded. Midoriya found it so weird that he occasionally questioned whether he was dreaming. Nobody gave a damn about heroes or quirks at Aldera Middle School. In addition to that, Midoriya had never been brave enough to approach any of his classmates. Fortunately, Midoriya became so engrossed in their conversation that he forgot he was in the nine-tailed form. Naturally, Midoriya was largely bewildered by Usagiyama's fascination with the more physical elements of hero fights, such as the punches and martial arts used. After all, quirks and their various applications captivated him far more. Nevertheless, both seemed terribly excited about heroes in general. But what were the chances of running into someone who shared his strange pastime? At Ua, Midoriya was beaming and wagging his tails with excitement as the two parted ways. He was, for once, optimistic about the day ahead. Perhaps there wasn't such a thing as a Fox Boy, especially when a pretty girl called herself that. So he went to his classroom, a sly smile on his face and his chest puffed up. Except for Mina Ishido, who complained that she preferred Midoriya in the three-tailed form, Midoriya's classmates didn't raise much of a fuss when he showed up in the nine-tailed form. Apart from that, classes continued as usual. The day proceeded at a dull pace after Aizawa briefly frightened them before English class. Midoriya tried not to think too much about a certain rabbit girl, but for the second time in a long time, he put his quirk, his forms, and all that mess aside and concentrated on his class. Lunch was always a strange affair. However, Midoriya was irritated by the spacious lunch hall this time. How was he unable to? That particular noon, people were being extremely noisy. Either that, or it was just his eagle ears. With a tray in her hands, Uraraka followed Midoriya and Iida and remarked, there are a lot of people today. Indeed, it does not help that the inefficient distribution of students across the tables have left little space for us, Iida said as she looked around. Leading the way, Midoriya said, guys, I think we have a table there. Uraraka said, are you sure? Someone is already there, but then he saw Midoriya's tail swaying. Did he seem a little excited, or was it her? The three of them headed straight to a nearly empty table across the crowded lunchroom. It was Rumi Usagiyama, there, looking at her cell phone. On one side was a half-eaten bowl of rice and vegetables, along with a few carrots. Midoriya questioned, is that big croc against Batman? That's a classic. Ah, Fox Boy, called Rumi, smiling. Yeah, I like going retro from time to time. Excuse us, fellow student. You would not mind if. Hey, said Rumi, smiling, I remember you, stiff boy. Yeah, sit down if you want. Midoriya leaned over to watch the video and hummed, that really is an old fight. To Uraraka and Iida's surprise, Rumi leaned aside and put the phone between them. Iida, in particular, was shocked that Midoriya had made friends with the rabbit girl. Iida cleared his throat and said, speaking of fighting, Midoriya, we might have a situation in our hands. Looking at the boy with the bespectacles, Midoriya blinked and asked, what do you mean? Well, do you remember that Uraraka and I both set off to UA training facilities, be it the gym for basic muscular enhancement or the battlegrounds to train quirks, while you were taken by Recovery Girl? Iida began. Midoriya asked, oh right, how did it go? The faces of his two friends were grim. That's the thing, Uraraka laughed sheepishly. Every facility is booked until the sports festival. They are what? Bellowed Rumi and Midoriya. I am afraid to say most upperclassmen left little to no available spots in the Quirk training grounds. There are not many supervising teachers available and we were too slow, apparently, to secure a reservation. Moreover, I suggest against attending the local gym. They were overflowing with students yesterday, Iida said. This is awful, sighed Midoriya. I don't think I can afford a gym. Yeah, me neither, Rumi muttered. Midoriya, perhaps introductions should be in order, Iida responded. Ah, right, Rumi Usagiyama. Iida Tenya and Uraraka Ochako. Guys, Rumi Usagiyama. Rumi said, aha, I thought you looked familiar. You are related to Ingenium, aren't you? Iida boasted with pride, why yes, he is my brother. Iida gave Rumi a squawk of outrage when she said, sweet. Tell him to learn how to kick next time you see him. Iida swore, chopping the air with a karate chop, my brother is more than capable at kicking. He has trained and pushed his body through rigorous. Oh yeah, Rumi cut in, that bad villain that escaped him last week probably thinks otherwise. Iida struggled to come up with a logical answer and spluttered indignantly. On their part, Midoriya and Uraraka laughed at their friend's expense. Iida whispered, that was just happenstance. So there is no place to train. Midoriya interrupted Uraraka abruptly. What are you guys going to do? I don't know, before UA. I trained with my parents by moving construction materials and equipment. That's how I increased my quirk limit to 3 tons, replied Uraraka. You were breaking the law, Iida exclaimed. It was the only way to increase the power of my quirk, a red-faced, guilty Uraraka muttered. But there are multiple places that could have served as sufficient training facilities, such as specialized gyms and dedicated quirk specialists. For instance, I had the opportunity to train with my family's equipment and under their guidance, Iida said. Rumi huffed angrily, oi, 4 eyes, we can't all afford fancy special equipment or quirk analysts. I'm self-taught, you know. My family just doesn't have the money. I might have had the chance to use gear during my rehab for a time, but for most of it I had to train by myself, said Midoriya. But the main reason he didn't tell them was that he didn't want to be seen in public in any other way. Quirk laws are stupid, why can't we just be free to use our quirks however we want? Rumi complained. Outrageous, said Iida, I thought it was common understanding we require such laws to maintain the peace. If people were given the opportunity to exploit their abilities, it would create vast inequality and societal mayhem. Just look at our history. But Iida, the dark age of heroes happened mostly because quirks were starting to show and no one knew how to react to them, Midoriya stated. Uraraka shuddered and said, it was a really crazy time, wasn't it? Those with quirks thinking they were superior and the future of humankind, the quirkless who wanted to eradicate those with quirks, she raised her eyebrows. So, what are you going to do, Midoriya? Midoriya inquired, about the training for the sports festival. Uncertain, he sighed, he gazed thoughtfully at the ceiling and said, I guess I'll have to practice with what I can. With Recovery Girl we came up with a basic plan to increase my core energy. The other 3 asked simultaneously, energy. Yes, Midoriya said, laughing, it is like my fuel. I spend some of it each time I transform or when use each form's power. He scratched his head and scowled. I don't know how to call it. Rumi said, ah, so it is like chakra. Uraraka's eyes sparkled as she asked, I know. You mean you are like a mage with mana. Maybe Chi or Kai would be a more appropriate name, Iida proposed. Midoriya laughed and said, "I rather just stick to energy, alright." With a broad smile, Rumi nudged him and teased, "You are so lame, fox boy. In any case, I suppose I'll have to find some way of increasing my strength. Maybe daily number of push-ups, pull-ups and the kind," said Midoriya. "You should have already been doing that, fox boy," said Rumi. "Really, do you need people to tell how to do everything?" Uraraka hummed, "I could do that too," but then grimaced. "It is going to be tough, isn't it? The sports festival is so far, yet we are all going nuts about it." Midoriya trailed off, "Well, given that every freshman student will be vying for the win. You should watch out for the general studies kids. Each year there is one or two of them who really want to make it to the hero department and will do anything to achieve that," Rumi advised them. "Hold on, so those from general studies can be transferred to the hero department?" asked Uraraka. "Of course, you don't think the school is just going to waste any free spots in the hero department, do you? I mean, 2A is made entirely of general studies kids that impressed the teachers during the last sports festival," Rumi told the three. Aizawa had expelled a whole class last year, minus Rabbit Girl, but Midoriya had forgotten. It appeared that another pro-hero was assigned to teach homeroom in Class 2A. With hesitation, Midoriya asked, "Say, Rabbit Girl, the attention of how many agencies did you catch last year?" "From pro-hero agencies, like 10, Rumi muttered in frustration. "From modeling agencies, 300. Startled, Midoriya's brows shot up his forehead. It wasn't just him. 10 agencies that are pro-hero. They had all assumed that Rumi had received 10 times that amount based on her appearance and performance. Uraraka questioned, "Really? But you ended up 3rd, right? Or were you 4th? 3rd, and pro-hero agencies take other things into account than your performance," Rumi grumbled. "The guy that ended 4th had 1,000 requests, for instance, while the 1st and 2nd places all had more than 2,000 each." Iida began, "But why did you?" but stopped short, uncertain if it was a relevant question. Iida decided to have a drink because she felt a little uncomfortable. Captured by the conversation, Midoriya and Uraraka began to eat. All of them gazed at Rumi, anticipating an explanation. Maybe they could figure out what to do after all. "It's my quirk. One of the side effects is increased sexual drive." The response was immediate. With some rice going down the wrong pipe, Uraraka began to choke. Iida spit out the water he had been consuming, dousing a table in the vicinity. It was worse in Midoriya. His voice was tomato-faced and spluttering incoherently. Rumi, on the other hand, burst out laughing. "Why, you are jesting, aren't you?" Iida asked, her eyes beseeching. Rumi shrugged her shoulders and said, "Oh no, it's what it is." She pushed Midoriya, who was still terrified and flushed, saying, "So yeah, I really want to get laid all the time. So are you up for it, fox boy?" Rumi immediately started laughing again at that. "But what does that have to do with agencies wanting to have you as interns or as potential recruits?" Uraraka inquired. When Rumi sighed, "Everything. Some pro-hero agencies have a zero-tolerance policy towards internal relationships and others might believe I am just a scandal waiting to happen. You know tabloids. They would love to have a hero that allegedly has increased sex drive. Most, though, probably believe that I'll get knocked up in no time, so I am not worth the effort." "That's awful," Uraraka exclaimed. "Aren't there anti-discrimination laws or something?" Rumi sighed, then grinned and waved a defiant fist, saying, "Bah, it's their loss. Once I go pro, I'll scrap their stupid agencies off the charts and make them regret their decision." Rumi's fearless demeanor and unflinching attitude were admirable, Midoriya had to admit. Iida declared, "But that is unacceptable. You are being discriminated against based on something outside your control, something defined by pure chance. Newsflash, 4 eyes, there are agencies choose based solely on your quirk," said Rumi. "Heck, it is becoming more common to marry people based on quirks." Uraraka shrugged dismissively and said, "Well, yeah, you kind of want to marry someone with a compatible quirk, right?" Iida looked horrified and cried, "How preposterous. I expected better from you, Uraraka." Uraraka blinked. Did I say something wrong?" Confused, Rumi said to Iida, "Wait, really? You of all people are surprised. 4 eyes, everybody knows hero families like yours are very selective on their partners. I mean, how do you think you've got 3 generations of Iida pro heroes all with similar quirks?" Iida said, that is different." For his part, Midoriya felt genuinely uneasy about everything they were talking about at the moment. After all, his parents had chosen to marry for love rather than the increasingly common quirk partnering. His mother was still concerned that her son would struggle to find a girlfriend when he was quirkless, though. Of course, Midoriya was made aware of her fear once she realized that wasn't the case. Midoriya asked, "Aren't quirk marriages illegal?" "Technically," said Iida, "it is frowned upon given the close resemblance to eugenics. However, it is impossible to regulate. After all, how can you tell when a marriage is performed out of love and when it is entirely based on the quirks involved?" Uraraka said, "Could we talk about something else?" Iida hummed as she looked at the time. "Perhaps we should concentrate on eating. We don't have much of lunch break left." Fortunately, that conversation ended there. But Midoriya did feel self-conscious about it. Could Usagiyama be motivated by her peculiarity to show interest in him? He shuddered at the thought. But he brushed the idea aside in an instant. Who would ever show that kind of interest in him? In addition to being a coward who was still attempting to control his own peculiarity, he was a wimpy loser and a nerd. He wasn't going to assume Rabbit Girl was just looking to jump someone for sex, anyway. She was either exaggerating or she most likely controlled that urge. As Midoriya recalled, she does have 8 family members. After that, they didn't speak much. They had more to talk about in relation to their training and food to finish. The remainder of the day passed without incident. That is, until a teacher returned for Midoriya at the end of the lesson. As he entered Class 1A, Nimari Kayama, better known as Pro Hero Midnight, called out, "Hello guys, have you seen Midoriya?" Everyone's attention was drawn to Midoriya, who was looking out the window in panic. A whip coiled around him as he leapt for the glass, ready to embrace freedom, only to be pulled across the floor once more. Midnight cheerfully said, Now Midoriya, we have a lot to talk about," while carrying a fox boy who was tied up and scratching at the ground once more. Help!" cried Midoriya. Midnight chuckled and said, "Come on, little fox, no need to put so much of a struggle." She added to the shocked, staring students, "It is for his own good." Hesitantly, Uraraka said, Why are you taking him?" In the background, Iida's talk about human rights violations and propriety was disregarded. "Aizawa and his mother want me to talk some sense into this naughty fox and help him design a new costume," Midnight sighed. "And I for one agree." Midoriya roared, "You can't keep me tied," and then thrashed wildly. After laughing and dragging the poor fox boy along, Midnight said, "How cute. You actually think you can escape from me?" The class gaped in disbelief. Was this what Midoriya was supposed to do all the time now? Iida was informed by Uraraka that, "I worry about Midoriya at times. I am certain that they will maintain a professional and healthy teacher-student conversation," replied Iida. In the background, Mineta Minoru balled his fists and gritted his teeth while sobbing jealously. The serene Mustafu district had a warm, sunny Saturday. Everywhere, people relished the day by the sea, whether they were lounging or spending time with loved ones. But there was one noteworthy exception, a green-haired boy who was panting. In actuality, Midoriya was unable to sleep. He had 3 weeks until the start of the sports festival. While working on expanding the capabilities of his other forms, he needed to get better at the nine-tailed form. In addition to that, he had homework, which included the extracurricular assignment for midnight. Zero-tailed Midoriya halted his run in frustration and surveyed the municipal beach, a familiar sight. He had seen it numerous times while getting ready for UA. However, he had never bothered to take any action. The beach, which was once a lovely location, was now covered in trash that had washed up from the ocean. After witnessing everything, people chose to ignore it and continued living their lives, hoping that someone with courage would take action. Even worse, some people deliberately disposed of their own trash. Midoriya realized that it was always like that. We constantly wait for someone else to handle our issues. Midoriya glared at the mountains of trash while balling his fists. The idea that people could permit beauty to be ruined by inaction alone was abhorrent. Abruptly, he glanced down at his hands and blinked. He had claws. With a sigh and a head shake, the boy transformed back into his normal, non-weird human form. The Zero Tails was his actual form, regardless of what Aizawa or others said. With a knot in his stomach, he realized that he was beginning to slip more frequently. But he was not taken aback. The more at ease he was in his fox forms, the more difficult it was to stay true to himself. It wasn't just a physical issue. Midoriya had gradually begun to see his other forms, personalities seeping into his own. Since he began training his quirk, it had become more frequent, but Midoriya felt that using his other forms was causing him to become less like himself. On the beach, Midoriya looked back at the corroded metal on the sand. I ought to do something, he thought. But he was aware that he lacked the courage to take any action. Or rather, he was aware that he wouldn't have much of an impact because, after all, he was Deku. With so many mountains of trash, what could one pitiful teen do? The world cannot be changed by one man, especially not by him. Midoriya sighed and turned to leave. But he pictured a better Midoriya, one who would smile boldly as he cleaned up the beach by himself. He wished that he could be like that. He stopped when the words of Rumi Usagiyama suddenly came to mind. Did she not get it right? He needed to stop thinking and start acting. Was he interested in cleaning that beach? Then he needed to begin and complete it. He rubbed his head absent-mindedly. He could definitely see the rabbit girl slapping him on the head for his hesitation. Midoriya clenched his fists and turned to face the beach. Was he capable? Could he accomplish such a lofty objective? I'm sure I could clean it before the sports festival with the nine-tailed form, Midoriya thought. He wondered hesitantly if that was a good idea. However, if I spend a lot of time in that shape, no. Izuku, stop being such a coward. Even if it means deviating from who I truly am, I must work on that form and others. But he hesitated for a second thought. I still have homework to complete and need to look up what Midnight requested. Okay. I'll ask Mom about cleaning the beach after I finish my run and do my homework for the day. I guess I'll have to take the trash somewhere. Additionally, the local government will want to set rules. Izuku let out a sigh. Wasn't it going to be much more difficult than he had anticipated? Whatever, he would. I could tell Rabbit Girl, perhaps. It's unlikely that she would object to assisting or using the entire situation as a training exercise. We could use this trash for our own training if Uraraka could train her quirk using tools and construction materials. In addition, the location is sufficiently remote. Midoriya reasoned that few people would witness us utilizing our peculiarities. The idea of being completely alone with Rabbit Girl made him flush. He jerked his head back in confusion, only to see 9 fox tails waving wildly behind him. He was horrified to discover that he had once more slipped into the 9 tails. At his tails, Midoriya yelled, "Stop you traitors!" But it was pointless. His desire to train with Rumi alone was clearly communicated by those damnable tails. He turned his head abruptly when he realized other runners were staring at him. Midoriya, utterly mortified, grinned sheepishly and continued to run. God forbid, why had this form to be so humiliating? Feeling completely ashamed, Midoriya thought, "Come on, Izuku, control your body." He felt exposed. You did this yesterday, you fool. Come on. At that time, you didn't panic. He told himself, well, I did have Rabbit Girl to talk to, before turning to his betraying tails. Stop it back there. What a weirdo, was what Midoriya heard from the other side of town. For the remainder of his journey, Midoriya remained completely red-faced as he returned to his human form. Didn't he just have to slip? He clenched his fists and shook his head. Stop doing nothing. I have a plan. I'll use my own hands, claws, or perhaps tails, to clean this beach. Whatever. Having a smile on his face and a bounce in his step, Midoriya arrived at the platform early on Monday. There were the typical tourists, exhausted and bored, looking at their phones or at nothing. Nine-tailed Midoriya recognized a pair of white rabbit ears in the midst of the small group. With a sly smile, he stalked over to Rumi. With Rabbit Girl in the corner of his eye, the green-haired boy sent one of his tails across the floor as he moved to stand behind a familiar pair of men in suits. It slithered toward an unobservant Rumi before retreating behind her. Rabbit Girl felt a poke in her right shoulder as she checked her phone for the umpteenth time. She turned slowly in that direction, but there was nobody there. She scowled as she glanced around. She was alone. No one was nearby. She chose to ignore what had happened because she was confused. She felt something jabbing at his left shoulder as she glanced down at her phone. She gave a leftward head snap. But she discovered no one, as before. An irritated eyebrow twitched. Rumi glanced back at her phone slowly, and, you know what? She received another poke to her right shoulder. Rumi swore and spun around, prepared to pursue the jerk who was bothering her. On this particular occasion, though, someone, a specific someone, started guffawing. Rumi yelled, "God damn it, fox boy," but then grinned. Midoriya moved to her side and apologized, saying, nice to see you too, Rabbit Girl. Sorry about that. Rabbit Girl noted, someone is in a good mood today. Alright, spill it you nerd fox, did you see an awesome hero fight? I wanted to talk to you, actually, Midoriya said. I think I found a good place to train. Rabbit Girl leaned closer and said, oh, I'm all ears. He inquired, have you ever been to Dagoba Beach? Rabbit Girl's face lit up with delight as she exclaimed, huh? That dump, what does that? Oh, it's perfect. Why didn't I think about it before? Actually, I was thinking about doing more than just training, said Midoriya. I want to clean it. With a horribly excited tone, Rabbit Girl said, oh ho, when did you grow a spine, Fox Boy? Community service and training in one package. I'm in. Midoriya had a suspicion. The two boarded the train when it arrived. Ignoring the other passengers' interested looks, they found a seat for them and carried on their conversation. Thoughtfully, Rumi hummed, we have to speak with the municipality, though. I've already done, Izuku smirked and said. They gave me the green light and a few instructions to deal with all the garbage. With a nod of approval, Rumi remarked, not bad, Fox Boy. That made Izuku's chest swell with pride. Fortunately, he was seated, so his tails didn't start moving to make him look foolish. It would have been a little too humiliating. First, I'll have to ask my parents, Rumi scowled and grunted. That surprised Izuku a little. He had the feeling that she was not the type to give her parents' order much thought. However, he didn't really know her that well. I'll give them a call during lunch, see if we could hit the beach right after school. In any case, give me your number. You never know, right? Rumi thought as she picked up her phone. That left Midoriya momentarily stunned. Rumi nudged him and asked, you listening? Before taking out his phone, Midoriya spluttered, sorry, I was thinking about something. They exchanged numbers within a second. Izuku was struggling to hide his awe, while Rumi was unconcerned about it. He had Rabbit Girl's phone number. Indeed, things had changed since last year, hadn't they? Changing topics, was Rumi's abrupt statement. How were your classes with All Might? Izuku wanted to scold himself for being too eager to share the final fact, but he said, and not bad. The first class was a battle trial, which I won. The second one All Might was missing and we had the class with Aizawa, and we went over infiltration. Rumi hummed, so you didn't have All Might on Thursday either. That's odd, we had him once, and the next class left halfway through. I've got no idea why. Maybe it was an urgency. I mean, it is All Might we are talking about, Izuku responded. He has a thing about saving the world and being the symbol of peace. While rubbing her chin, Rumi scowled and said, but that is what I don't get. You would expect to find a good fight or be inundated with notifications in the Hero Watcher app, but I've found, well, nothing. Like, it's All Might. You'd expect him to be all over the news if he just sneezed in public. Now that you mention it, I have noticed the number of his sightings has decreased over the years, said Midoriya. But then again, crime has fallen drastically, mostly because of him, and whenever he shows up, all signs of villains just, well, vanish. Who would want to go up against the likes of All Might? That and maybe he has other, stuff going. He must have a private life, right? With a sigh and a head shake, Rumi said, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's going to be like when he finally retires? Midoriya scowled, his fear of such a day seeping into his bones. He muttered, I guess, it will be peaceful for a few years but, crime will inevitably skyrocket. Rumi chuckled and nudged Izuku, saying, that means we'll have to get way stronger, Fox Boy. He sheepishly acknowledged, I'm going to need a costume first. Huh, really? Just get a jumpsuit and be done with it, Rumi grumbled. Look at me. All I asked for was a leotard and that's it. Izuku blushed as he looked at Rumi. It was difficult to imagine her in a skin-tight costume, and Izuku was very glad he was seated because he could feel his tails begging to wag with excitement. Forms of accursed stupid tails. Izuku had never encountered such disobedient tails before. Well, my first costume was a jumpsuit but, it was a bit childish and I've been asked to change it into something, that really shows who I am, Izuku admitted. Thing is, when you can change into different personas, it gets hard to pick the right theme. Rumi smiled and said, PFF'd, it's obvious what you should go for. Huh, a Shinto priest, come on, don't tell me you didn't think about it before now, Rumi chuckled. I can totally see you, with their robes and all. Izuku had no intention of basing his costume on any particular religion. But the reference to Shinto priests did evoke another thought, one that was associated with the feudal period in Japan. Rumi's suggestion might not have been so bad after all. He would consider that later, though. He was dealing with a rabbit girl at the moment. Surprised, Rumi cried, "Sweet carrots, this place is worse than I remember." Rabbit Girl studied the enormous task that lay ahead of them while standing at the base of tiny mountains of rusted refrigerators, microwaves, ovens, dishwashers, and God knows what else. Izuku was also a little nervous about what they had decided to do. The trash mountains appeared larger up close. They might have taken on more than they could handle. But now they would not give up. Rumi hummed in agreement, secluded and with tons of stuff to lift, push, and carry. Not bad, better yet, we can make out in peace. Izuku squeaked in shock, what? Laughing, Rumi gave the nine-tailed boy a pat. She guffawed, please, never change Fox Boy. However, the very idea of doing so with Rabbit Girl made Izuku's face heat up. Izuku was a little uneasy about being by herself with her now that she was only wearing shorts and a simple white sweatshirt. In contrast to her, he was wearing his typical green tracksuit, though he pondered whether he might eventually need something similar to Rumi's outfit. How about a warm-up before we start? Rumi smirked at Izuku. Izuku, flushed, said, what do you have in mind? Midoriya, he told himself, keep your mind out of the gutter. The rabbit girl's smile was frightful. Izuku felt his face turn icy white and lose its agitated crimson hue. Rabbit Girl smiled and said, you and me, right here, I've been dying to fight you. So come on. You will defeat me, Midoriya moaned. You have the experience, the speed, the strength, the ouch. Waving the enraged fist she had used to cut Midoriya off, Rumi glared at him. The poor boy caressed his aching head and could only stare in concern. Come on, Fox Boy. Do you want to be a pro hero? No excuses. We go all out, alright. Rabbit Girl was brave. Just do your best. Izuku glanced around. Would he be able to run? He gave a headshake. What was he contemplating? He was unable to simply flee. He had to struggle. Even so, he knew he couldn't win, despite his desire to show he wasn't a coward. She will destroy me. I have no idea how to punch. Izuku thought frantically, then looked around him. However, I don't have to, do I? Izuku noticed that he was grinning at Rumi, which caused the rabbit girl to jump up and down. We fight until one calls for surrender or can't continue fighting, alright. Izuku made the choice. He looked at his watch. 5 minutes, then we start cleaning the beach. Rumi chuckled. PFF, this will be quick then. Alright Fox Boy, we'll do it your way, but I don't want to hear you whining afterwards. But to her surprise, Izuku smiled, flashing his razor-sharp canines. She gave him a suspicious squint. Why did he suddenly appear so self-assured? I thought he was up to something. With a cunning twinkle in those savage eyes, Midoriya laughed and said, you took the words out of my mouth. Leaning forward, he extended his claws. All right, then, smiled Rumi. She was already giddy with anticipation. The two leapt backwards and found themselves standing among tall heaps of metal waste. They gazed at one another, barely a few feet apart. They remained motionless. They looked at the other instead. Midoriya braced himself, but Rumi saw flaws in his posture. Then the fight started. In a flash, Rumi was on Midoriya, as quick as a bullet, and poised to land a final blow. But Midoriya was prepared. Expecting to strike flesh, she swung her fist. Rather, she flew past a cloud of white smoke and struck thin air. Excited to see the boy employing his strange talent, Rumi landed on the sand 10 feet away and snapped her body in Midoriya's direction. What she saw did not prepare her. A green fox gave her a smile before taking off, in the opposite direction. Confused, Rumi blinked, only to watch the fox plunge into the trash. Rumi screamed, Oi, what the hell? I'm here you coward. A mocking voice said, afraid of getting dirty, little rabbit. Or afraid I can beat you. Rabbit Girl smiled, of course, and accepted the challenge. She had a lesson in store for Fox Boy. Over here, little rabbit, the fox mocked from inside the trash heap in an oddly serene voice. With a smile, Rumi shot directly at the fox. She gained lethal speed thanks to her legs, and the whole garbage pile was knocked down with her kick. The clash of the waves drowned out the thunderous sound of all that trash collapsing. Rumi was able to jump backward and avoid the trash. She chuckled, ready to quit. Fox boy. No response. Confused, Rumi said, Fox boy. The stack of tires, rust, and God knows what caught her attention. No movement could be heard. Had she killed Fox boy? Oh no. After saying, yeah, real funny, she scowled. Fox boy, she said hesitantly as she walked toward the pile. Rumi pushed the trash aside and said, come on, Fox boy. A tiny childlike hand suddenly leapt off a stack of tin cans and grabbed her nose as she was about to push a tire out of her way. To her surprise, Rumi found herself smiling gleefully as she looked at a small child named Midoriya. Laughing, he said, got your nose, bunny. Before vanishing into the trash. Anger swiftly replaced Rumi's relief. The fuck, exclaimed Rumi. I was worried, you idiot. So you do care. Rumi jerked her head away. The same child fox boy who had grabbed her nose was standing on another trash pile. She glanced at the front trash, then sideways. He had gotten up there when. Catch me if you can, bunny. The child waved at her and jumped into the trash pile while giggling. Rumi roared, oi, come here and fight me. Clank. She flinched when a tin can struck her. When she looked over her shoulder, she saw the young Midoriya. Red eyes staring at the fox brat, Rumi scowled. In that form, could Midoriya teleport? Did he possess superhuman speed? Bunny is slow today, the disrespectful brat chuckled. Come here, you little shit, screamed Rumi as she leapt straight for the fox brat. Midoriya, the child, was unfazed. The fox child hurried into the trash, laughing in that childish voice of his. Frustrated, Rumi kicked wildly, knocking down another pile of trash. Rumi exclaimed, oi, this isn't a fight. Clank. 20 feet behind her, child Midoriya emerged atop a corroded barrel, and Rumi thought she was going crazy. She glanced down at the tin can that had struck her head. Fox brat cooed, bunny doesn't like the rules. Before giggling and disappearing into yet another pile of trash. Oi, the idea is to come out here and try to beat me. Rumi grumbled. Poking Rumi on the stomach, the fox brat squealed, wrong. And fell back into heaps of shattered ovens. Rumi moved away from the garbage mounds. Clank. Her head could be struck by another discarded tin can. She jerked her head back and asked herself, why was I still surprised? There, Fox Brat was laughing. Fox Brat cackled mischievously, remember bunny, we fight until one of us gives up or can't keep going. Rumi sprang at Fox Brat. But he was prepared and leapt into a stack of broken TVs. But her hand had been an inch from the fur, and she had been close. She swore as she hit the sand. She had been played by Fox Boy. Rumi screamed, so that's how you are going to fight. Somewhere in the trash, on her left, a childish voice said, I'm playing to my strengths, lady. It's cowardly, yelled Rumi. On her right, the same eerie voice cried out, you give the impression that villains will follow the rules. Rabbit Girl's fists clenched in rage. She was being played with by Midoriya. However, despite her reluctance to acknowledge it, he was correct. Not every altercation would be public or the way she desired. She would be damned if she publicly acknowledged that she didn't enjoy this type of fighting, though. Her ears perked up as she squinted at the trash. The only sound in the space was that of the sea. Then she heard it. She smiled as she leapt forward and struck with such force that she destroyed stacks of refrigerators, tins, barrels, and microwaves. Not even close. Shocked, Rumi jerked her head back. The rabbit girl was enraged by his bored expression as he stood there. You do what you want. I am going to catch you and make a pair of slippers, Fox Boy. Fox Brat laughed and blew a raspberry at her, saying, try it, bunny. At the end. With a roar of rage, Rumi charged at the trash. Unfortunately, it looked like that was how the fight would go. She would try to catch Midoriya when he would show up somewhere and taunt her. But every time he slipped in the trash, he turned up somewhere else. 4 minutes had gone by before she realized it, and she was perspiring. But worse, she was becoming irritated. Ultimately, she simply shook her head and fell to the ground, extremely irritated. Fuck it, what's the point of this shit if you aren't going to fight? She murmured. Are you giving up? Rumi turned to her left and felt an eyebrow twitch. Midoriya was lying comfortably on a rusted car, kicking the air. I don't give up, snarled Rumi. Child Midoriya retorted. No, you just waste time and energy. You know, maybe you should think a bit before you act. Rumi spit out, shut it, Fox Boy, and shook her head. I don't do cat and mouse. Even if it means saving people? Asked child Midoriya. Rumi frowned but remained silent. Rabbit girl, I know you like to fight and you want to punch people, but not all enemies are so straightforward, you know. Some are sneaky, others just can't be punched, said Fox Boy. Rumi concurred with him entirely. But she had no intention of acknowledging it. Indeed, she had no intention of acknowledging that she might have been impatient and hurried like a fool. She detested being motionless. She was not good at thinking things through. As he looked at his watch, Fox Midoriya hummed, perhaps we should begin cleaning. With a sly smile, Rumi seized the moment. She was immediately above Midoriya and quickly seized the boy. Now that she had the Fox Boy in her hands, she was overjoyed. But she knew she had been duped by that sly smile of his. You know, before you rush in, you should try to understand an opponent, like his quirk, Fox Brat grinned. After scowling, Rumi realized what the boy had meant. She was holding him 1 second, and then he vanished into a smoke cloud. She felt something encircle her torso as she stared, about to swear. 3 furry tails abruptly lifted her into the air, causing her eyes to widen. Arg! Cried Rumi, thrashing about. Unfortunately, there was nothing she could do. The tails were as hard as steel, and she attempted to pry them away from her. 2 tails and that prodded her stomach, deliberately tickling her. Screaming, stop it! Rumi chuckled as she fought the tentacle-like tails. A very familiar fox boy was standing below her, at least 6 feet away. 9-tailed Midoriya chuckled and said, I can't believe you dropped your guard like that. You son of a bitch! Exclaimed Rumi. How did? If you had taken a moment to study the movement of my 2 tails form, you would have realized that I didn't have teleportation or warping, Midoriya said with a smile. Confused, Rumi said, 2 tails. Unless. Her eyes widened in realization. But you had 1 tail. She asked. Midoriya remarked, I duplicate in that form. Funny thing is, I can transform into my other forms from any of the 2, making the other tail vanish. Perfect for a diversion. For instance, just now, I managed to crawl right behind you, all while you were distracted by my 2nd tail. Rumi snarled, that was cowardly and underhanded. This doesn't count as a victory. At that, Midoriya's shoulders slumped and his smile vanished. A twinge of guilt stung Rumi's heart. She simply couldn't bring herself to acknowledge her own shortcomings, though. As he said, Rabbit girl, you can't expect all villains to be pathetic or dumb. But I guess, he said, with a defeated tone. He sighed and shook his head, saying, I'm sorry about it. I guess you are right and I am a coward. She was lowered gently, and Rumi scowled. Although she was grateful to be upright again, the young lady felt terrible when she saw the poor fox boy. Rumi, in fact, was unhappy. Knowing exactly what she had to do, she grimaced. Rumi nudged Midoriya and remarked, no, you fought smart, fox boy. I was just being a sore loser. You were right, I should be a bit more patient. You aren't the first to tell me what you did. She walked over to the garbage. So, shall we get down to business now? When Midoriya grinned at her, Rumi's guilt subsided. She gave him a smile. Midoriya laughed and said, yes, I suppose that is what we were here for. He gestured up the little hill and said, all right, so we have to take garbage up to the parking lot. I've been told someone else will take the trash to a proper junkyard in the morning. Rumi said, how about a competition? Midoriya taunted, 1 defeat isn't bad enough. Har har, sneered Rumi. I'm going to make you eat those words. Whoever moves the biggest pile of trash in the next hour and a half to the parking lot wins. Hesitantly, Midoriya glanced at her. Rumi laughed, what is it? Afraid fox boy? No, hurriedly puffed Midoriya's chest. You are on, rabbit girl. He said with a defiant smirk at her. Rumi chuckled. She was still in the game. Poor hopeless fox boy, even though he had won 1 round. Midoriya mocked, are you ready, rabbit girl? On the count of 3. They smiled as they leaned forward side by side. They prepared for the race that followed. 1, called Midoriya. 2, noted Rumi. 3, exclaimed the pair. Rumi leapt directly to the trash and grabbed a refrigerator. Midoriya was surprised to find that she could lift it. She did have some difficulty, but it was still impressive. Rumi ventured, ha, can you beat that? Only to watch Midoriya use his 9 tails to lift a rusted dishwasher and a broken oven. Her mouth fell open. Piece of cake. Midoriya gritted her teeth and mumbled. On his way to the stairs, he trotted across the sand. Rumi yelled, in your dreams, fox boy. She smirked as she gritted her teeth and glanced at the stairs. Midoriya felt secure. After all, he possessed the strength of 9 strong tails, regardless of how strong Rabbit Girl's arms were. He wasn't sure he could maintain the pace for very long because it was difficult. Rabbit Girl couldn't defeat him with just a couple more ovens and the like. Why was winning so important to him? Midoriya had never felt so excited in his life, but he wasn't sure. That is, until Rumi smirked back at him after landing a good distance ahead. How could he have forgotten about her strong legs? For heaven's sake, he had jotted it down in his notebook. Rumi laughed and rushed up the stairs while holding the refrigerator. "You are going down, fox boy," she exclaimed. Midoriya tightened his jaw. He wouldn't lose. He must have prevailed. They continued their small game as a result. Rumi was quicker than Midoriya, but she was unable to lift as much trash. Conversely, Midoriya was the opposite. Every time they came into contact, they exchanged jabs, their faces growing redder with fatigue and their breathing becoming more labored. But they refused to stop. Their goal was to defeat the other. Naturally, both were aware from the start of who would prevail in the challenge. As a result, an hour and a half later, a triumphant Rabbit Girl stood in the parking lot above a fox boy who was almost unconscious. Rumi managed to get 5 times as much trash on the parking lot as Izuku did, and she was not on the ground, panting frantically. Although she was exhausted and sweating, and her clothes were clinging to her body, she was faring better than Midoriya. Rumi chuckled and said, "You really thought you could defeat me, fox boy?" She took a moment to unwind before settling down next to Izuku. She patted the boy and said, "Still, not bad." Izuku complained, "I think I'm going to throw up." Rumi sneered, "Don't you dare do that on me, fox boy." She reclined. The two stayed there, catching their breath, as the day was already coming to an end. Rumi laughed and prodded the boy with her finger, saying, "You need to put some more muscle." "And, why you need to think more," wheezed Midoriya. "Maybe," was Rumi's shrugged response. They had moved some trash, which she examined. "Well, now is time to stretch. Move your ass, fox boy." With a limp, Izuku muttered, "Just end my suffering." Rumi exclaimed, "Oi, I am not done playing with you yet, fox boy." She gave Izuku a light kick. "Come on, move it, or you'll regret it tomorrow." Izuku sighed, and to think this is just day 1, what exactly had been on his mind? Izuku was exhausted but genuinely happy, despite the fact that he was closer to death than anything else. The next morning was going to be painful, wasn't it?
I will continue this story in next part. Till then, bye bye.